How many days a year, if you had to guess, do you say you spend in the woods?
How many
Honestly,
days does your wife know that you spend in the woods?
She won't see this.
Well over 300.
Wow.
He caught me off guard.
That's because you're going to just do double claps. And we're back.
Oh, you did that. I see.
Yeah. HUNTR Podcast episode, God, I don't even know, 27? 27.
Hey, yeah.
How about that?
Mm-hmm.
July 1st.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Welcome to July.
Finally, dude, my soybeans are like,
Oh, we got pounded with rain the last 2 days.
I think
really.
a lot of the eastern states and Midwest did. It's been hot. It's been like 90 for going on a week now, probably 4 or 5
I sent
days.
you that picture of that big bachelor group moving through. They were just like out
that.
playing in the rain, enjoying it. So, yeah, it's been a scorcher recently and dry, so we needed it.
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
sure. But it looks like we're going to be in pretty good shape here for the next few days, down into the mid-70s in this area.
I mean, dare I say, those summer food plots, like our beans specifically, I think we're set for this.
Good.
Yeah,
that'll be it.
They'll be good.
This is the kind of rain we need come July, August for like Nebraska or something, and it gets you through.
It's perfect timing for, I mean, we're going to seed here in a couple weeks. I don't know if it'll last quite this long, but there probably will still be some soil moisture 2-3 weeks from this rain right now.
I think so. I mean, it's a steady enough rain. It's soaking in for sure. Mm-hmm. It's a soaker.
You know what? I'm heading up to the farm Saturday. Yeah, and I was going to spray all of our fall plots just to get ready for a mid to end of July planting. I wasn't sure exactly what the protocol was on spraying beans with glyphosate after he planted. Apparently, it's 24 to 30 days.
Oh, really?
Is the deal. It's quicker than I thought. So, yeah, I'm going to probably end up hitting those Saturday as well.
Yeah, knock it all out.
Get it all done, and then we'll go back Monday. So we're heading to the lease, and I think we're just going to spend some time there, getting some cameras rolling, working with the landowner, getting that thing.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what's on there. Yeah, that's a cool thing. I mean, we've got our landowner from Base Camp Leasing there who's, got a disc stuck that we need to get out. But it'll be good just to work with Bob on some things and make sure he's ready to go. He's going to plant a lot of the food plots for us this year just because he wants to.
Yep.
So we'll get him seed and knock yourself out.
Yeah, well, he's been doing them, for years, just lime and fertilizer.
We're just kind of wrangling him to the time frame that seems to be a little bit more optimum for planting.
That's it. I don't understand. I mean, he's not a bad farmer. I think he used to, farm commercially in some regard. And, he just doesn't know when to plant brassicas.
Well, he's probably been used to planting cereal grains and things like that for so long that, ultimately he's always planted in that like early Labor Day-esque time frame. Yeah. So when you tell him, oh yeah, we want you to plant brassicas at end of July, he's like, why?
Yeah. Well, it's gotten earlier and earlier for us. I know I probably started no earlier than mid-August.
I've almost always planted mid-August up until a few years ago. I did hit one in late July, and it was great until we droughted out. Mm-hmm. And then you're dead.
Well, that's the reason for it is, the brassicas are pretty hardy when it comes to lack of rain, but you do need rain for them to keep growing. So if you plant them earlier, the chances of catching at least one more rain is a little better.
Yeah.
So we like mid-July.
Shout out to a couple people commenting that we're their favorite hunting podcast right now. See, you don't read the comments. I do, and I appreciate it.
I appreciate you.
And they're not my mom saying that either. That's even more impressive. Yeah. They're like people I don't even know.
That's good. That's awesome.
Also shout out to the haters giving us 1 star on Apple Podcast.
Oh yeah, we got a 1 star.
You pieces of shit.
That must have been you got the 1 star. Could have been me.
I like to believe it's just our competitors out there just 1 starring us because they feel us breathing down their neck, coming hard.
There's people out there that just hate everything.
High fence hunters. They're douchebags,
including themselves. So
yeah,
there's quite a few of those people. Actually.
I mean, people can be jealous because we find big bucks and they can't. I mean, that's just.
I don't know about that. Maybe
the guy we got on the podcast this week can find big bucks.
Well, the best we can hope to do is learn, from people who clearly are, have a wall to show for it. So
yeah, and so we've got Steve Sherk on, and it's kind of funny. People look at some of the podcasts we've done. Jeff Sturgis, Aaron Warbritton, Bill Winke. You hear Steve Sherk, and a lot of people probably don't know who he is, but Steve's in the northern tier of Pennsylvania, and all you have to do is go on Sherk's Guide Service Instagram and look at some of the just absolute toads that he is getting on camera on public land in Pennsylvania. I mean, giants. And it's consistent, like go back in multiple years. And so, Steve will tell us, like, I think this guy practically lives in the woods, and who knows how many cameras he has out, how much scouting he does, but
it sounds like quite a bit.
He finds them. And I mean, I think that kind of relates a little bit to us. I mean, obviously we want to get out there and we want to kill a big buck come season, but dude, I have as much fun, if not more, just trying to find big bucks, and then playing like that chess game with them once you find them.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's a crazy thing, but we talked with Matt Morat not too long ago from Pennsylvania Game Commission, and Pennsylvania is not known for producing big bucks, right? It's opportunistic. It's just having deer hunting opportunities. And so you start to think about somebody like Steve being in the big woods of Pennsylvania, not even in farm country, and like I would assume getting on, very mature deer.
Maybe to rephrase, I don't think that Pennsylvania is not known for growing big bucks. I think that a lot of people assume that if it weren't for the Orange Army, they would probably exist.
Oh, 100%.
Which I think speaks even more to what Steve is doing, is he's able to find some of these bucks who are eluding the Orange Army.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because it's not like, oh, he's got giant 3-year-olds camera. A lot of these bucks look super old. In fact, probably over 5 years old.
Yeah.
And so they're eluding them, and he's finding them, but then they're also eluding him, and so it's amazing how these deer are able to survive in some of these areas that are just big wilderness type pieces. And there is no, ag, there is no food plots. It's just pure scouting and movement and trying to pattern these things. So yeah, it's pretty crazy, but I'm excited to have Steve on. I think it'll be pretty cool. I bet a lot of his tactics and strategies and spending time in the woods is probably relatable to a lot of things that we've done, especially when we get on public land. But I think he's probably a wealth of knowledge. I know that he has a lot of support on Instagram for a lot of the people that have come and hunted with him in the past season. So, yeah, you want to bring Steve on? There he is, dreaming of big bucks. Daydreaming of big bucks. For a split second, you reminded me of like...
I thought he was dead.
You reminded me of like Kermit the Frog looking out the rainy window. Like, I wonder if big bucks think of me too.
Well, when you're in the middle of the woods and you're a guy like me, I feel like I'm in the deer stand right now. So hopefully it won't be too distracting.
Coincidentally, a lot of Pennsylvanians do hunt out of their vehicles.
Yeah, that is for sure.
The go-to strategy.
Seen some of that, it's been me.
Well, Steve, we appreciate you coming on the Hunter podcast, man. And I was telling Jared, and actually Ian was asking too, like, how do you kind of know Steve? And I was like, well, man, I just kind of stumbled across your Instagram at one point. And obviously being a Pennsylvania guy and kind of growing up hunting big woods and stuff, like that's always an attraction to me. And then, you instantly get drawn into seeing some of the bucks that you're getting on camera and the sheds you're finding. And it's like, okay, like this guy is on big deer, and it not for lack of effort, right? Which we'll get into today, but, it's one of those things that I think, growing up here and kind of evolving through the last couple decades of what hunting in Pennsylvania has been like, people will constantly say to me like, oh, that's a good deer for Pennsylvania. And they're not wrong, but there are giants in the woods of Pennsylvania still.
Absolutely. And I think it's getting better and better. So hopefully we've got a lot to look forward to.
Wow, that's interesting, especially talking to, we know a bunch of guys in big buck states saying it's getting worse and worse.
What do you think is causing it to get better in some of these places, Steve?
I mean, my overall opinion I'm seeing is lack of hunting pressure. Now I hear, and I can only speak for where I'm at.
Sure.
Especially in gun season, years ago, it was, you've probably heard of the term the Orange Army.
We were just talking about it.
I mean, literally, after the first 3 days of gun season, you can drive all the back roads here, and there might be days you don't even see a vehicle in a 10-mile stretch.
Right.
So, I mean, I do think the archery pressure has went up a little bit, but obviously, archery's a little more challenging. So overall, I just think it's the lack of pressure and maybe combined with the antler restriction.
I think one of the interesting things there, Steve, is that obviously, growing up and really starting to hunt in the 90s and early 2000s in Pennsylvania, we were still, a lot of us were still, call it, flocking from the southern tier of the state to the northern tier of Pennsylvania, to go to our deer camps during Thanksgiving weekend and all that kind of stuff. But it was it was already on the decline at that point, right? We were already out of the 70s and 80s, which was probably the pinnacle in early 90s. And I think even more so now, that's declined a lot. And so being that you're up in that northern tier, do you think that is a lot of it when you start seeing decreases in hunting pressure, is that just people aren't having those large family type deer camps anymore up there?
Absolutely. And there's some of those camps are still going, but a lot of the hunters are, well into their upper years, 70, 80, 90 years old. They may hunt a little, but in these woods, if you don't have the greatest physical health and abilities, your chances of success are way less. So you don't have as many younger people out anymore. It's just, it's probably a combination of a lot of things too, but like I keep saying, it's just mainly lack of hunting pressure.
And that's something that, I would say most people, when they think about where are the most pressured states for hunting, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, those states consistently come up. And so to hear, to be honest, you're one of the first people I've talked to in Pennsylvania that actually has said, yeah, I think pressure is going down in some of these areas. But that being said, I hunt here in the southwest corner of the state. We've got the Forbes State Forest that comes through here and the northern part of the Appalachians. And I mean, I've seen pressure decrease. It used to be you'd see 40 trucks in a single lot during opening day of deer season. Now you see 7 to 10. Still a lot of people, but not like it used to be.
Yep. And then, you have hunters are more selective now. Shooting bigger bucks in Pennsylvania is becoming more attractive and kind of the thing that more people are focused on. So people are letting deer go now, combined, with the antler restriction. And I honestly don't think we're going to see it get any worse, or really, I think it's going to go in the way of getting better, or at least staying as good like this for quite a long time.
You said this, Steve, it seems like archery is on the, you've seen more pressure during archery season.
Yep. I mainly during the rut, early October, you don't see much pressure, even mid-October, but come November, and now that, you can use crossbows and that, I think there's a lot more archery hunters in the woods. And I mean, I know they're killing more bucks with archery gear than what they used to, but once again, I just don't think, I don't think there's enough pressure out there to see a decline unless all of a sudden things change in a hurry and, the gun pressure.
I don't think it will.
And in fairness too, I think guys hunting with archery tackle at least have the ability, because they've got to kill an animal at close range, to get a better assessment of that, deer before they're just firing off rounds across the field. Oh, I thought it was a doe.
Well, and even with, and again, no knock to the crossbow guys, we've had this conversation before, but a lot of your, let's say your vertical bow guys, even when you get into the traditional side, these guys are pretty hardcore. I mean, look at some of the places that Jared and I even hunt. I mean, we're hiking in deep, and early to get
as
into
much
those
as
spots.
It pisses me off that they got there first. I'm encouraged to, when I see a good setup and I'm like, this guy knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is.
Yep.
Or I run into a guy that's our age and he's even evolved into a trad bow or something.
Yep.
That's pretty
Yep.
hardcore.
Where you tend to see those crossbow guys kind of still sticking to the gun mentality, which is I'm within 250 yards of my vehicle type of thing, or I'm setting up on the ground. Yeah. So I think that you do see that was an interesting piece, because we're trying to get some data out of Matt Moret from Pennsylvania Game Commission. I think we're going to work on that. But
so we've seen the numbers, and the hunter numbers are not on the decline in PA, right?
They're actually on the uprise.
Yeah.
But it seems like a lot of that is on the archery side, likely because of the legalization of crossbows, across the board for people.
So, Steve, what kind of strategies do you employ, if any, to get away from that pressure? Are you actively seeking out pieces of ground that don't seem to have it, or how are you doing that?
I mean, I wouldn't, we're especially guiding. Like one of the hardest things is telling people, how they need to be prepared physically in these kind of woods. And, guys are stubborn. Some guy's not going to say, well, yeah, I'm a 300-pound fat guy that can only go 100 yards. Guys don't say that. So generally, you'd be surprised. We've had
you just make that assessment for yourself once they get there.
Yeah, I feel like you break them.
You're like, oh, this is a 300-pound fat guy.
Yeah.
Yep. No, I mean, we don't even have. We may have a few sets and spots that we hunt guiding wise, like a mile back in. A lot of them are no more than 500 yards, maybe a little less. But I keep an eye on. I'm in the woods so much that I know the hunters in the area. I know spots that get hunted more than others. I feel that I have, a good way of getting around hunters, and there's just so much ground here too. You can kind of spread out better. I think if you're hunting smaller pieces of public, that's when, it can be way more challenging dealing with other people.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's overall, it's kind of spread out here, in my opinion. You can definitely have room. And if you are running into a lot of other people, there's always somewhere else to go.
How many days a year, if you had to guess, do you say you spend in the woods?
How many days does your wife know that you spend in the woods?
She won't see this.
Well over 300.
Wow.
So, yeah. But I mean, I'm not one of those guys that has to drive a half hour or an hour to where they hunt. And I can go right out my back door too. So
what are you doing with those 300 days? I mean, what do you spend that time in the woods doing?
Just constantly trying to learn particular deer better, learn areas better. I mean, it's so many different things. If it's shed season, shed hunting, I run, last year we ran over 100 cameras. This year it's going to be more like 200. So
wow,
just all those things. And when you say, it sounds like 300 days a year, there's, you can do anything. You'd be surprised when you run that many cameras, and then you have a guide business on top of that. 300 doesn't even seem like enough sometimes.
Well, and I guess it's all, relative to the amount of ground that you are trying to cover, which,
yep.
Any idea how much is that?
We're definitely in several 100,000 acres here.
Oh yeah.
So
that'll do it.
Wow, man.
Yeah. It's not, that's another thing. People, they see, the trail camera pictures and they think, oh man, I got to find out where he's at, because I'm just going to go right in there and be run over by him, when I always say, only 10% of the woods up this way is good. But when you have hundreds of thousands of acres, that's when that 300 plus days a year scouting comes in, because you're able to, and it's not so much finding, but I think it's more eliminating a lot of spots too.
That's 100% what it is. I mean, dude, you can walk into some of these places and I feel like everything looks good, but it's not.
Exactly.
Right. So then it's like process of elimination of like what actually is going to produce versus, hey, this looks good, so does this. Wow, this does too.
That's so foreign to me, dude. I just try to imagine spending 300 days a year in the woods. I can't fathom.
I guess Steve so obviously everybody hunts in different places, has different habitats that they're going after. Like, so let's look at Jared's got a farm in Ohio that is very agricultural, pasture based.
Eastern Central, not really too far from here. It's about an hour and a half from Pittsburgh.
Yep. Yeah. So not too far probably from where you're at, Steve. And then, so it's very, I don't know, I call it fragmented corridors, small wood blocks.
Yeah, we're just outside of big timber, like where big timber transitions into ag and cattle ground. Mm-hmm. So, we've got a fairly good size tract of ground. It's 1,000 acres out there, and there's probably 300 of it is timber.
So I guess
the remaining is pasture, or we've brought it into ag type of deal. But it's pretty fragmented.
You look at that as compared to 1,000 acres where you're at. And so Jared's probably focusing on different bedding areas, transition from pasture to crop ground or food plots. You're in big woods, right? So I guess what are some of the things, and right, don't give us your secret sauce necessarily, but what are some of the things that you're looking at when you walk into a piece of ground? Let's say it's 1,000 acre area of, that public ground that you're saying, okay, here's the points I'm going to check out, or walk us through that process of how you even start to think about that?
Yep. I'm mainly like a thick cover guy. I find more bigger deer in thick areas versus like remote country than anything. I just think mature deer have a tendency to know and want to seek out thick cover. They also love, because you hear so much about buck bedding.
Mm-hmm.
They love bedding areas where there's a ton of food inside them too. People think that a buck just has an area where he beds and where he feeds, but the best bedding areas I know have a ton of food inside them. And I think they're kind of like me. Like when I'm in bed, I'm never too far from the snack drawer. So I like
your
to have
thinking.
a snack. Sometimes I'll even wake up in the middle of the night and have a snack, but I definitely, that's how, mature deer are. They may bed a long way from maybe a primary food source like an oak ridge or something like that. Yeah. But they love bedding areas where there's a lot of good browse.
Mm-hmm.
They'll get up and nibble on stuff throughout the day.
When you say thick bedding areas, Steve, is there a specific type of like vegetation that you would say that consists of, or what do you mean by thick? Just thick,
like clear cuts?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. Clear cutting. And I mean, sometimes you just have them in the big woods where, you'll have areas that almost look like they've been clear cut, but it's just natural regen and those kind of things. And, I always say a lot of my scouting and hunting is in the higher elevations. That's where most of your big deer are going to be, because obviously, we hunt mountains. So it's just, a process of eliminating, when you go into an area, I'm eliminating so many other things. Now I'm focused on higher ground. I'm focused on cover and, bedding areas and browse sources. So that, that's kind of like a good starting point for me, not to carry on too much, but my rut strategies are completely different than that. So if later on, if we dive into rut, I don't want to sound like that's just all I do, but that's kind of like, early season, gun season, just outside of the rut. That's kind of
so higher elevations, thick cover.
Dude, it's really interesting to hear you say that, and I've not the first time I've heard that either. Especially with like the military crest for bedding areas and downwoods. Like I'm well aware of that whole mindset. And where actually I came across it for the first time was I've talked about it before. There's a DVD that some of those guys did. It's called Hill Country Bucks. Have you seen this?
Mm-hmm.
And
I've heard of it.
Yeah, it's really I mean it's like B-level production or whatever. But
it's like old school primetime buck type of thing.
Yeah, it was really insightful, and I was like, man, this is like what I've been looking for this whole time, and like it was just amazing. And I can't tell you, like I have seen exactly the opposite on my farm. Like,
oh really?
Yeah, those deer don't go high at all.
Mm-hmm.
Every mature buck that I've ever encountered on my farm, whether it be bedding or travel, is in a ditch.
Low ditches.
A ditch.
Yeah.
Is not to interrupt you, but is it like bigger mountains or is it just roughly hill country?
Yeah, I mean it's like hill country. There's definitely some decent terrain.
It's more rolling hills though.
Yeah, it's farmable ground for the most part. There's some steep ridges and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a lot of multiflora and just a lot of oaks.
Mm-hmm.
I've done a lot of TSI in quite a bit of it, but yeah, it's just bizarre. Like I'm with you in that I would expect to see. I'm like, oh, I can see why they would want to see from up here, but then sure enough, I'm bumping them out of these bottoms and stuff almost every time. And when I see them traveling, if they are on a ridge, it's because it's a hogback that splits a gap, or it splits a ditch right down the middle. So it's ditch, and then it splits, and there's a nice hogback that runs right up the middle of it. And I've killed some deer off of those, but
yeah, I mean, I killed that deer coming off a high point on public land, on game lands.
Yep.
He was bedded up on a knob that was like, I mean, you would walk up to it and it was giant boulders, and like it looked like caves that could like run through these giant boulders. And, I don't know where exactly he was bedded on there, but he came right off of that top, and I was halfway down in between him and where I thought he was hitting that destination scrape.
Yeah.
And caught him in between.
Yeah, I just think that high low, the elevation thing is really interesting. It's been a revelation for me. I'm like, oh, I'd kill every deer on his property if I just get in the ditches.
So
the problem is wind.
So Steve, you talk about that being different than your rut side of things. Are you seeing because Jared and I are big individual deer hunters, like meaning like we're focusing on specific deer to hunt. Are you seeing specific deer utilize the same bedding areas and stuff in the summer as they will in like late winter or even early fall as you get to pre-rut?
Some do and some don't. It does seem like, I'll watch a buck for 2 or 3 years and then I'll see, he'll kind of either have, he'll have a summer, possibly even share that same bedding area in the fall. And then you notice some deer just completely disappear and you might either catch him, get a glimpse of him 2 miles away or maybe on a camera a couple miles away. Every deer is a little different. I do think some of it is based on the habitat. Like, if he's got everything he needs in that summer spot and, the right browse, food, water, seclusion, there's a good chance that, he'll stick around there early season too. And it also, another thing that I notice, from summer to, like late September, early October is their overall movement really shrinks. A lot of people think some of these deer have disappeared when they're just so tight in their daytime movements that it's just so hard to see them or get pictures. Mm-hmm. So, that's why I'm not one of those guys that like hunts the biggest deer he knows the biggest deer I've maybe got a picture of, but I generally hunt deer that I've learned a lot about and that I've seen patterns and consistencies, because in the big woods, if you don't know about the deer you're hunting, it's almost impossible to kill them.
To the point about habitat you made, in seeing a change in, primary, what's the word I'm thinking of? Primary, just primary area that these deer are living in. It seems like, and Sturgis talks about on this a lot, would be like a high stem count type of cover in the fall. And I guess it makes sense to me. They can't necessarily tolerate that while they're in velvet. So they're looking for more early regen, goldenrod fields where they can
where it's not
see
beating
more
up and hitting on their velvet as much.
And so from that respect, it makes a lot of sense that they would be looking for those types of, different core areas is the word I was looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Or what you'll see is they'll still live in those areas, but the bedding and the feeding is on that transition, that edge.
Yeah.
They can still browse on the edges, but going in is probably a little rough on them. That's for sure.
So Steve, let's take just a kind of a giant step back. Obviously, at some point in your hunting career, whether you're younger or whatever, did you lay eyes on a big buck in the big woods or something? What was the trigger that basically said, like, hey, I want to do it and I want to do this here because I think it would be awesome?
Well, I mean, it's not really that, because I grew up here and this is all that I know. Mm-hmm. But it's really like, in my even in my teenage years, like, my passion just grew stronger and stronger. And, I'm just like a lot of hunters where, the more we do it, I swear for a lot of us, the more we start to fall in love with it. Yeah. So it's just been like an evolving passion. And now, that I'm older and I've talked with, a lot of hunters even throughout the country, like, in my opinion, the big woods is the most challenging and most rewarding though. So, I'm just in love with that more challenging type hunting. Not saying that whitetail hunting isn't challenging in other places, but I do think, especially up in this area, it's as challenging as it gets. And I also like that hard aspect or real challenging part of it.
I think one thing I can tell, just kind of following you on Instagram and even hearing you talk today, and relates to me, and I think Jared too, is the pursuit of finding those deer and patterning those deer and getting on those deer, to me, is probably as exciting, if not more exciting, than actually shooting the deer.
Absolutely. Like, I don't really pay much attention to anti-hunters, but there's just so much more into this than the kill.
Yeah.
And I even think that even a lot of hunters miss out on they think, they're just deer season hunters, when there's not a time of the year you can't go out here and have fun pursuing and scouting and just being involved with whitetail hunting when you're really not even hunting them.
That's an amazing
just an
point.
amazing thing to be a part of.
Yeah, how many like hunters or people that buy a hunting license like don't get to experience 90% of what we enjoy about hunting?
I know.
Exactly.
That's
and
crazy.
I don't know if it's just in our blood or however you want to word that, but I couldn't be more thankful to just be in the position I am in and just to have this passion. And I'm sure you guys feel the same way. Like if I didn't have whitetail hunting, I don't know if I'd even want to be on this earth.
Dude, that's what I ask Jeremy all the time. I'm like, dude, what do people do? Like if you're not like, I spend the whole year looking forward to hunting season. And when hunting season gets here, obviously it's not 300 days a year, but like I'm constantly thinking about it. When I wake up in the morning, I'm like, man, I'm going to get up and spray my beans. And like, it's a whole process that I love.
My wife hates it. Cause like literally the first thing I do when I wake up, I'm like, cell cam check.
Yeah. I really don't understand what people who don't hunt or have just a passion. Like,
it is, man.
What do you do? Yep. And I understand that not everybody is supposed to hunt, and there's other things.
There are. Like, I love to fish. Like, I still love being fishing. I love taking the boys and going out fishing, but it's not like I do that for fun. Like, I'm pretty serious about whitetail and how I do that. Like, it's two different things. Fishing's fun for me and it's no pressure. Like, when I start thinking about whitetails and get engaged and start laying out cameras and scouting, I'm in a whole different mindset than the fun mindset of fishing.
That's a fun lesson in marriage too. I think generally speaking, and I don't want any women to come after me for. I think generally speaking, women are not as inclined to have that kind of a passion about one specific thing. Mm-hmm. They more like they like to spend time with their friends. They want to spend time like with their husbands, and they want to. Whatever they do. Sometimes like Margie likes to garden.
I mean, Emily loves running. I would say that's her closest relationship to how I feel about deer hunting is how she feels about running.
But is it? I think
that's a nice hobby, honey.
I just think, well, I just think that men for whatever reason we're just some of us anyways have that like just instinct to hunt, and it just consumes us. Mm-hmm. And I'm grateful for it because man, I don't know what I'd do without it.
Well, I mean, Steve, you're out there today. Like you said, you had a rainy day, and it's like, okay, like here's my strategy to get out in the woods. Like there are plenty of deer hunters out there. I would say probably 90+% of the deer hunters out there who aren't even thinking about hunting right now.
Absolutely.
Not at all.
And I mean, I'm not against that.
No.
As long as they love to hunt, that's great. One thing too, I'll throw in, and I'm not trying to talk, say that I'm better than anyone, but my goal is to be a great deer hunter, not to prove to anyone but myself. But if you are involved in all kinds of things, golf, fishing, you name it, like you will never be able to truly master something. But when you really, because, we all have jobs and it's even harder at an older age. But when you're able to really just focus on something as much as you can, that's when you'll find yourself at your best because you've put all your time and effort into that one thing.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, 100%, man.
Yeah. Do that, and that's a big trade-off because there's guys like my dad is the perfect example. He likes doing all kinds of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
He loves.
And good for him. Enjoy it.
Yeah.
But you're right. Like you're just not ever gonna be.
You'll never master it, in my opinion.
You'll never master it, and so I mean that's I know in my life I've prioritized hunting over a lot of things, not everything, but and it's for that reason. I also want to be a great whitetail hunter, and so I'm willing to, all these days that I'm spending planting my food plots or running my truck, doing everything that goes into the season. It's like I'm intentionally neglecting working on making house improvements or like improving my business, whatever.
Well, there's always something like let's even take it within the deer hunting like mindset. Right. There are things even within that you won't master. Like I'll be the first to say like, I don't shoot my bow every day. Like I shoot my bow so I feel very confident with how my shots are. I know my limitations and I'm ready for the season to make accurate shots, but I'll never be a world-class shooter because I end up doing food plots or trail cameras or scouting or something else, more time invested in that versus these guys. There are world-class shooters who all day, every day, they just shoot their bow.
Yeah, but I mean, hunting is not just archery. Like,
I agree.
Hunting is so many things. And I think within our, even the three of us having this conversation, probably have different like specialities or even just things that we enjoy more about the entire process than the other.
Yeah. Yep. Like I love trail cameras.
There's just trail cameras, yeah.
Yeah, I'm a trail camera fanatic. I love trail cameras. Prior to cell cameras coming into play, 100% during the season, so let's just say from October 1st to end of December, early January, I probably was 4 times the amount of time spent on checking trail cameras and doing trail cameras than I did hunting. Like I'd rather scout and check cameras and reposition and do that than be in the stand and just sit there when I'm like, yeah, I'm not ready yet.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
That's just that's how it is.
You're not talking about anything that I don't know about.
It's crazy, man. But it when you start to think about strategy from that side, and from a holistic year-round view, like you say, you spend 300 days, like each piece of that year, even though you might be finding bucks in late spring, early summer, just popping velvet, like you're still learning something behaviorally about that deer. And understanding that is going to help in one way or another as you approach hunting season. Whether it's he was here, he was using this, I think that he's a quality deer, I know age, I know score, or something of like his potential to be a deer that I want to target this year. Like, something about that deer that should help piece the puzzle together as you get closer to the actual season.
Yep. And even people talk about deer have summer homes. Some deer, it seems like, have a home for every season. But I have learned in the rut, I would say 80% of bucks will go through all those different areas. And I'm not saying, where you get them in the summer is where you're going to kill them, but you've learned something, that you've learned part of his home range.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he will come back there most likely at some point in time. He may come back there a lot. I mean, every deer is a little bit different, but like you said, every picture is more than something to just drool over. It's a piece of information, whether it's the direction the deer is coming from, the time of day, or the particular location. And those are all things that hunters should pay special attention to. And every little piece of information adds up to something versus, we can't be always just going out here in a day and swinging for the fence. It's a little bit here, a little bit there, and that all starts to add up and then lead to success.
I think it's super interesting to assimilate that to human patterns.
Mm-hmm.
I know that I notice it in myself, like when I do something weird or that I haven't done in a while, I'm like, I haven't stopped at this McDonald's, like, and it's been a couple of weeks or whatever, and I'm like, and then I start thinking like, oh, well, I'm like home most days at certain times of the day and stuff, and it's like, it's pretty relevant to think about, like, oh, well, it makes the most sense that I spend the most amount of time like at home or at work, but every once in a while I stop at the post office, and then I go to the the McDonald's down here or whatever, and then I make big excursions to my farm to go hunt. And like, I know that these deer don't have like an agenda or a plan necessarily, but it's pretty freaking similar when they're like, oh, I think I'll get a drink of water. I think I'll pop over and hit that mineral lick real quick. I think I'll chase that doe down here. And if you can kind of just like think about your own mind and your own pattern in your own life and try to assimilate that to like what a deer's mindset would be, it's kind of the same.
Absolutely. I'll add to that. I always talk about, like, you have to get inside a buck's head if you want to kill him. Like, and they are similar. We talked about deer similar than us, but they're even more easier when it comes to their lifestyle. Like, it's basically this time of year, it's eat and sleep. That's all that they're doing, and avoiding some pressure. In the rut, that's when I think it's more does and breeding than anything else. But, today I might have 10 different things going on, when a mature buck, for any day, he's got 2 to 3 things on his mind, and that's about it. And when you can find in his area the things that he's looking for, then I think you can get dialed in on him even better.
Yeah.
Yep. No, I think that makes sense.
If you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball.
That's exactly what it comes down to. I think when you start to break down kind of these mature bucks, especially, I mean, that's what a lot of us are at least focused on and looking at. You know, when you start to look at kind of the behavior that comes through, I know one thing that I always catch people kind of talking about, whether it's on social media or whatever, is they'll get, you know, a handful of pictures here and there throughout the summer, and they're like, you know, I've got a pretty good beat on this buck, and I don't think that's the case.
Can I just I have to ask a question really quickly? Can you run trail cameras on public land in Pennsylvania? I see. Can you run those on mineral or any kind of food?
I don't know.
In most places you can, except once again, I don't think you're allowed to on game lands.
Game lands. Okay. So like, I guess let's lay that broader term out before we're jumping in the next section. Is like in Pennsylvania, there are multiple types of public land. Game lands is what everybody thinks about.
News to me, dude.
Yeah, game lands are like
news to me.
They're like, oh, well, you're hunting game lands. No, there's state forest land, there's national forest land. I think some of the nature conservancy type properties are open. Like there's multiple types of public land that are open to hunting in the state. It's just people tend to think state game lands is the number one, and that's not what you're hunting.
Yep. No. And like I said before, we hunt all different kinds of public lands, and some of it is private land open to the public, you know, owned by like timber companies and oil companies. So
what is that program called in Pennsylvania?
You mean?
I know it's maps in North Dakota. Is that the same across?
Well, they have like the what is it, like the game cooperatives?
Oh yeah. I have seen those.
It's called. There's one thing up this way called Kinzu Quality Deer Cooperative.
Yep.
But yeah, there's so many different types of public lands in Pennsylvania, and it's important to know, you know, there's different rules in some of these lands too. So before you just step foot and do whatever you want, you know, find out where you're hunting and then get an idea what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. And then, you know, just enjoy it, because we are very lucky in the state to have all the public land that we do have.
And isn't that crazy? Like we talked to Matt Moret from the Game Commission a couple podcasts ago, Steve, and like the instant thing, like it doesn't matter if you're on national forest land or state forest land or whatever, right? The immediate blame tends to go to the Game Commission overwhelmingly, right? Like, I didn't see anything out there, or there's no deer here anymore. And it's like, do you realize like they don't even like manage that? Like they don't even have they have the statewide bag limit authority, but in terms of like actual habitat management on this, they don't have a choice. Like they don't have any say in it.
Yep. No, I have nothing at all against the Game Commission. I praise them for a lot of different things they do. And I truthfully don't think we would have the big deer that we have in the state now if it wasn't for the Game Commission, and especially Gary Alt. Like there's probably some listeners that would hate what I just said. You know, Gary Alt was I would want to say, especially a lot of the older hunters. I think he was a much hated guy.
He was.
By most, but I'll tell you what, I would not trade what we have now for anything, you know, versus years ago, you could see 50 deer in a day, and now you might see 50 in a season. But this, at least for me and a lot of other people I know, what we have now is as good a deer hunting as we've ever had, in my opinion.
I would agree with that. And I think that a lot of the things around Gary Alt was, number one, change, right?
Well, and
in the mindset.
Real quick, too, his comment is, I think, interesting in relation to what Matt said, which is they're not necessarily trying to get the biggest.
They're not trying to grow big deer.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not. I mean, they're trying to get deer to the next age class, but Pennsylvania Game Commission it's essentially a catch per unit effort. They want an opportunity of number of harvests for numbers of hunters, period. Versus, you know, places like Iowa and Kansas who are managing for lower numbers of hunters and higher quality of deer. That said, I think that they're, you know, maybe by forms of a natural evolution here between antler restriction and aging hunting demographic, and maybe some people in the state just being turned off by the way that things have gone and maybe their experiences hunting.
And culture of big buck, assigning cultural value to, you know, high scoring animals.
It's starting to create the opportunities in Pennsylvania to kill big deer. I mean, I've killed big deer in this state, you know, deer that are bigger than other states that I've killed, you know, that people would say, well, you probably killed bigger deer out in Missouri. No, I didn't. I killed bigger ones in Pennsylvania.
Yep.
Just how it is.
And I know, especially, you could call me an outfitter. Like I compete against outfitters in different states. And like I've pulled, not bragging, but I've pulled hunters that go to the Midwest to Pennsylvania because they see what's here now. And like, you know, kind of what we touched on, there's, I don't want to say that there's as many, but there's definitely big deer in Pennsylvania now, as big as anywhere in most places in the country. That's a fact.
Can you talk to us a little bit about your guide operation? Like, how do you run that? How many hunters do you bring through it? If you want to talk about pricing, I'm just interested about the whole deal.
Yeah. Yep. I really only guide during the rut, a little bit in gun season. I'm probably gonna start eliminating, you know, some of the gun hunting in the future. But
and what do you
it's
consider
mainly just rut bow hunts?
What do you consider the rut? Yeah, what time frame?
Like, well, I mean, it used to be mainly just November, but I'm a big October guy, and I think a lot of my clients see some of my success and knowledge about.
Yeah, we don't want
October,
Steve
so
to be killing them all in October.
Yeah.
We should probably
like October 20th through like third week of November now.
Yep. I think this year we're even got some guys coming in like the late teens of October.
Yep.
So, and I mean, that's fine too. So I would say anywhere from the late teens of October right through the whole archery season is you know, when the guiding is going on. Now, really, I'm not really taking on, like, I'm not trying to grow this business. I definitely could. I like to keep it somewhat small. I'm guiding maybe around 30 some hunters a year.
That still takes a lot of effort, man. I mean,
oh yeah.
Do you have
it's like 100 per day, basically.
Do you have other people helping you on the guide side?
My dad helps me, and that's pretty much it. Like,
wow.
You have to watch too, because, you know, it's crossed my mind. Like, yeah, I could grow this and hire guides, but then what's going to happen is it's public land. People can take advantage of the way I do things and the spots that I hunt. My dad, I give him credit. I mean, he's taught me a lot of that I know about deer hunting and this area in general. So he thinks just like me, and he's about the only person that I can trust 100%. So, you know, he helps me some. Other than that, I mean, it's pretty much all on me. And, you know, with those 30 some guys a year, I honestly do pretty much have my hands full. So.
Yeah.
And so are these guys, are you putting them up?
Yep. Yeah. I mean, most of them, I like them to bring their own stands just because there's a lot of liability on me. Like, if they fall out of my stand or something breaks, then, you know, it's going to be my fault. Not that I would ever want an accident, but they bring their own stand. You know, I like it because more liability is on them.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, some people say, you know, I got guys that don't even own a tree stand. So, you know, I'm still willing to
a tree
put
what?
the stands up and, you know.
So are they staying in like a cabin with you, or did they stay in like a local hotel, or how's that work?
It's about a mix. Some of them stay at our place. You know, we can only have so many people, you know, stay and we only have one bathroom in our camp. So, I mean, it can get a little rough. Some of them stay in hotels, some of them stay in cabins, some of them bring a camper. I've had people get a tent site. Like, you know, we're willing to deal with whatever kind of hunter there is, pretty much when it comes to, you know, how they're going to do their lodging or whatever. That's not a real big deal to us.
So walk us through, Steve. If I'm like, hey, I'm looking for like a late October, early November rut hunt, like what does that process look like for me from planning to when do I come in, where am I staying, and how am I getting to the stand and all that?
We do 3 and 6 day hunts. Most guys choose a 3, but a 6 day is way better. Although a six day costs more money, but to come and go anywhere in the country and try to get it done in 3 days. And
are you comfortable sharing? Are you comfortable sharing the pricing on the podcast, Steve, or we can have people just check out your website?
Yeah, no, it's for the most part, if they stay with us, it's $875 for 3 days or $1,500 for 6 days.
Wow.
So it's pretty reasonable, but we don't really have any
reasonable.
overhead. I mean, the camp's paid for. We don't own any land. Just, you know, so it's other than, you know, all the gas and that I put in scouting, which I'd be doing I'd be doing that anyways if I wasn't guiding.
It's a business write-off now.
Yeah, exactly.
Is there is that associated, Steve, with any kind of like you have like trophy fees, or just regardless that's just set price, and we're gonna put you on the best buck we can?
You wouldn't owe me a penny more, except I do appreciate tips. Most guys will give you a tip, especially if they get something, and we don't do like the butchering or the processing. So if they can either do it themselves, or I know a couple different guys that do processing in the area. But other than that, I mean, guy can come with us to Pennsylvania for 3 days or 6 days, for $1,500 or less. But I will say, and I'm not, trying to turn down anyone, but it's getting harder and harder for hunters to book with us because the same guys just keep coming back.
Yeah.
But, I like to meet new faces, but then again, I really like my group of guys that I'm, kind of developing every year, because you get a guy for the first time, you don't know how he likes to hunt. You don't know what his abilities are, how much drive he has, and so many other things. But once someone comes one time, you have a good idea on how to guide them. And a lot of the times, I will say, the first year, a guy isn't going to have success because it's a learning experience on both sides. But once we get a good feel for that hunter, then, and if he keeps coming back, he'll definitely have success.
Yeah. So they come in.
Yep.
They're either staying with you or they're staying at a lodge. And then, so what's the plan? Like day one, meet us at the cabin and we'll drop you off, or how's that work?
Normally we, cause we have like different areas that we hunt. We'll have like, if it's my dad and I guiding, he'll have a small group of guys and I'll have a small group of guys. And, the ones that aren't staying with us will meet at a specific location not far from the area we're going to hunt. And then they'll follow us. We like our clients to bring a vehicle because just in case something ever happens, we don't want them to rely on us, like constantly checking in on them, or, most of our stands are very easy to find. We have trails to most of them, once you see it once, you can pretty much find your way in and out every time. So we like them to bring their own transportation, follow us. And then, we normally, we do what I call the 3-day strategy, where you'll have a morning stand, you hunt till noon, 3 days, and then you'll have an afternoon stand. We'd like to get in there by 1 or 2 p.m. at the latest, and you'll hunt that stand for 3 days. That strategy, in my opinion, is it may not be the best for different other parts of the country, but in the big woods, it seems like if you hunt a stand for 3 days at a good spot, one of those 3 days, you'll hit it right. You got to put more time into your stands in the big woods is kind of what I'm trying to say. So, the two of the nicest bucks we've got the past 2 years have been shot on the last day of the guy's hunt in the same stand for 3 days in a row. And like the one guy last year, in 3 days, or the first 2 days, he'd only seen one deer out of his afternoon stand. And on the third day, he begged me to go to a different stand. And, we gently argued a little bit. And then I got him to go in that stand, again on the third day, and he killed a heck of a buck. So it's not big woods hunting is not like you go out there and there's constant action. Like, it's a grinding type hunting. It messes with your mind. I mean, you have to be patient, and you really, if you have a guide like me, you have to have 100% trust in your guide, or else you're not going to have a good time.
I was going to say, I thought it was, important that you said that there's trust and learning happening on both ends. Cause a guy like Jeremy or I might come into your camp and we have a fair amount of experience hunting, maybe not as specialized as you do in your area, but it might take some time for me or for Jeremy to concede to be like, well, okay, I'm going to trust that you know the best, versus, well, dude, obviously these bucks are cruising this ridge. Like, I'm going to go do that.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, but if you can establish a trust, and, a good outfitter knows their area, knows the deer, it can be a beautiful thing if you find that.
Yep. And that's what's happening. And like I said, it's not a business that I'm growing. So I would say that it's established. It's not something that, I could just quit and make a living off of. if I kept it this way. I do landscaping, so that's like my main source of income, but I'm just happy with what I have. And it honestly is way harder than what people think. I'm not giving myself credit, but it was really hard at first to get people to come to Pennsylvania on public land.
Oh, I can't even imagine,
I didn't have much of a proven track record, but now I feel like I'm over that hump, and it's just a really good feeling.
At first, I would feel like, oh, so you're gonna pay me to come hunt public land in Pennsylvania, or like I don't get it. But yeah, it is. It's one of those things that I think you make a good point about kind of the expectations around that, because a lot of guys will think like, when I go into a guided hunt, I'm just gonna like, it's constant action. There's deer everywhere, and at some point I'm gonna have an opportunity. Whereas like what you will probably be in the best case to have an opportunity, but it's not going to be constant action. It's going to be a mental grind on that thing. And it's just, we've really come down. This is where I say, Jared and I tend to try to hunt individual deer, is that, I don't need to see 15 deer in a sit. I just need to see the right deer. That's all I care.
I'll go the whole season just to see the right deer. That's all I care about.
I know, man. And that's a tough thing. So obviously you mentioned last year you ran like 100 cameras, and you're probably closer to 2. How many of those are you running on a cellular basis now?
Very few. I mean, it's more expensive to run all cellular cameras. But the biggest challenge with cellular up here is limited cell signal. Like I could only think of a few places I could park today where we'd be able to. Did I lose you guys?
We lost your video there.
All right, somebody's trying to call me. Let me decline it.
Okay. There you go.
We good now?
Yep.
Yep. Yeah. So
signal.
The cell signal's so limited up here that there's so many good areas you want to put a cell camera, but they just won't work. But
wow, that's nuts.
I'm getting more and more, and if it were me, I would only run cell cameras because the benefits. Obviously, you never even have to go intrude that spot and just leave it be. And, there's way more benefits from running cell cameras. But in this area here, unless they start popping towers up everywhere, you're not going to be able to do that.
Yeah, I say that's pretty wild because, I mean, dude, I don't think we've ever not been able to get a cell camera up and running.
I mean, I've had a few areas. Where signals struggled and it just hasn't sent. But, I mean, I could count them on 2 hands out of a lot of cameras I'm running.
Yeah.
Do you think that by running standard cameras, I guess, how often are you checking your standard cameras about?
I mean, this time of year in certain spots, I got a lot of them I'm checking once a week right now.
Mm-hmm.
The ones like near my stand sites or where I think I'm going to hunt, I might check once a month right now this time of year. But then, in hunting season, it all just really plays. It's not like I have like a rotation, but, hunting season is a very short period of time. So if you go a month in hunting season without checking certain cameras, then you might as well not even have that camera
100%.
there. So,
yeah, you missed all the information.
There's times you're more aggressive and times you're not. I do think, like, I talk a lot about clustering cameras, and what I do about that is when you cluster cameras in an area, you can have cameras that you check that are somewhat still monitoring that area, and then you can you might have a camera that you can monitor 300 yards from a stand and then have another camera right at that stand, but you don't check that one that much, but you check the one 300 yards away. I really think that strategy is the way to go, because deer do pay attention to where they're picking up human scent and people and predators throughout the woods. So if they have little spots where, they're not really getting interrupted and then you can slip in there undetected, I think you have a good advantage that way.
How are you running those cameras? And does that change throughout the year? Like I asked earlier, if mineral was legal, it sounds like that it is on some of these places. Yep. Is it primarily on mineral throughout the summer? Is it scrapes year round? Or?
It's about a division of 3 different ways, like say like 30-some% mineral, 30-some%, just like maybe on licking branches.
Right now, that would be in the summer.
Yep. And then, and I'm talking about the summer.
Okay.
And then right now also, I'll just have some just like on trails, because Preferably I'd like to put a licking branch in every spot, but sometimes it's just there's not a tree or the right setup for that. You just have a camera on a trail.
Right.
I have a lot of those kind of spots right now too. But then, in hunting season, a lot of ours obviously can't be on minerals then, but it's still, if we can, we like to have, a mock scrape or something. Just if you can get the deer to stop for a little bit, I just always think that you get much better pictures versus one time passing by.
How about in November?
In November? Well, I don't know if any of you guys saw my post, on our trail camera study we did last year.
You saw it?
Yeah, I did.
But November, in my opinion, is not the greatest time of year.
Freaking worst to get pictures. Yeah.
It's challenging. Like a lot of the pictures we get in November are just a blurry picture of a buck with his nose to the ground cruising by.
Or you'll get a doe that comes to hit the licking branch and the buck's way in the background.
Yeah, it's a very challenging time. But the best thing about guiding is, like our best stand last year, we didn't have one good buck picture in November at this stand site, but yet that was the stand that had the most action, most bucks seen. We killed a couple bucks out of it.
Yep.
And if you just had that camera there, you would think, oh, there's not much going on. But you put a hunter in there and they'd come back, jaw dropping, like you wouldn't believe what we saw today, and nothing's going by the camera, or maybe some of it too could be quality where they're just flying by our cameras at that time of year.
Yeah,
but
I couldn't agree more.
Very tough time of year to go by camera intel.
I couldn't agree more. What do you think about that stand? Gave way to you're we got to hunt this, even though we don't have pictures. Is it just terrain?
Well, and it was near, it was kind of near a doe bedding area, and then there was like a pocket of oaks, down the ridge more. So we were closer to the doe bedding, but there was a good pattern. Like obviously does bed close to food, and it was an isolated stand of oaks. So the does in that area it was like clockwork. They would bed up on this point, go down to feed, and we were just kind of in between. And the bucks try to pattern does just how we try to pattern deer. I mean, they don't just go through the woods and walk wherever hoping to find a doe. Like they know where the does are. They probably know where every doe lives, and by scent and things like that. So it just became a consistent thing because the does stayed around. And I'm just late October we were getting good pictures because the does were kind of hitting the scrape and bucks were hitting the scrape, but then the scrape went dead that was there.
Yep.
But yet nothing really changed. It's just the way the deer were moving and chasing, and it's almost like it's kind of like being in a pinball machine that time of year. Like
it is,
bucks,
man.
They're not just, they're kind of unpredictable as far as how they're going to come through areas, or they'll fly by your cameras, like I said, without getting a good picture. But we definitely, I would definitely recommend, don't totally key in on trail cameras once November comes.
Dude, 100%. I mean, I will say, because I'm a trail camera fanatic, whether it's, and as much as I love trail cameras and even love cellular trail cameras more, it is the Achilles heel of my success in hunting season, because I will 100% rely on a camera until it's too late. And I'm like, man, I can't believe there's nothing moving here. And it's because I'm relying on a field of vision of 60 degrees in one direction. And that's it.
I do think there's an element too of you and I are both, I don't know, whatever you call A personalities. And we want to control the situation.
Yeah.
And there's probably more basically, we would rather be good than lucky.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'd rather have the buck patterned and kill him on the scrape that I've been getting pictures of him than just know a spot is good and catch
luck.
him.
But deer hunting is luck.
It is luck. I do. Before we move on though, dude, I think that's a really interesting point about keying in on the doe movements. And frankly, it's one that maybe I've overlooked a little bit in the pursuit of, a good tree, a spot that just in general, a lot of deer are going to have to walk past it. It's a good funnel. It's, it's in a good transition area, whatever. And maybe it's crossed my mind, or I'm aware of it. Find the does, find the bucks. I've heard that.
And And I mean, not to interrupt you, but that's like entirely our rut strategy is,
Please.
we don't even really target particular bucks in the rut, because in the big woods and maybe other parts of the country, like a buck's range in the rut is just incredible at that time. And he's just going to go wherever he finds, that first hot doe, and then the second and third and whatever. So basically you're just kind of using those does as bait. And if you do hit it just right, and, one of them's in heat, then that's when those stands turn on even more, because, other bucks will even come in, and, you'll just have,
because the does don't really leave, right? Like they don't change their pattern other than for food sources and bedding areas.
Summer and fawning and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yep. And, if you got more big woods listeners, the thing you'll find in a lot of big woods, at least up my way, is, we don't have like a ton of deer. I would say it's a low to medium deer density. So when you find good pockets of does and you're able to pattern them, like that's where the bucks have to go, because they can't just go wherever they want and find does. There's limited numbers of deer and does. So you find the does, you find the bucks. It's pretty much as simple as that.
I think that's really important, Steve, and kind of even branching outside of Pennsylvania. So Jared and I are going to hunt Southern Illinois this year. We're going to be hunting Shawnee National Forest, public land,
which is a couple 100,000 acres. I thought that was big, and then you told us how much PA land you got.
I mean, but very comparable, and maybe not the mountains, but extremely hilly terrain in some of that area along the riverbanks and stuff. Some big timber in a lot of that areas. And so thinking this strategy, like we're going out there in another, 4 weeks to start a scouting session, 3 weeks.
3 weeks.
To start a scouting session. And so we're kind of looking at these places. We're looking at natural, funnels or pinches or saddles and things like that, just to get in there and at least have somewhere to start. But thinking about it long term of like, where's that bedding area that's likely going to be holding does? And then where are those does heading, and get in between them?
So I want Steve to talk a little bit about, like, you talk about patterning does, and what does that entail? Like what kind of strategy is
I mean, the easiest way to pattern does is to find a food source, because does do not bed far from food sources, nor do they travel far. Yep. A buck will bed. Honestly, I've seen bucks bed a mile or two from a food source. Does stick close to food. This year will be a little more challenging, because I don't think we're going to have any mass crops. A lot of years we rely on the oaks to produce, and then we go from there.
Because of the late freeze, Steve? Sorry.
What's that?
Because of the late freeze and stuff that you got up
there?
Well,
we have frost issues, and then up here we have a horrible, like, gypsy moth issue.
Really?
Like, I've never seen this in my life.
I've seen some too at our place.
The oak trees up here are bare right now.
Oh my God.
And then another thing that's crazy, not to get too off topic, is it is harming the deer a little bit in those areas, because they're not gypsy moths yet. They're inchworms or caterpillars, whatever you call it. They'll turn into gypsy moths, but they've run out of leaves to eat on the oak trees. So now they're eating all the understory underneath. So deer in these areas, in my opinion, don't have hardly any food, because their diet's green this time of year. And so these areas are wiped out. It's kind of interesting to see what the deer are going to do. But getting back to that, so even if you don't have mass crops, does are still always more patternable than bucks. They have smaller home ranges. In my opinion, they put up with a little more pressure. Not saying they're dumb, but they'll put up with more pressure. So, we have like this, the summertime, I get tons of pictures, and then if you follow me enough, you'll see a delay in pictures from like, late September, early October. And it's not that I can't find as many bucks then, but I'm not even trying to find bucks. We're moving all our cameras towards in our rut areas, and where we know, or at least trying to find those concentrations of does. So we're not even worried if we're getting buck pictures in a lot of areas from like early October, even almost to late October. All we're worried about then is patterning and finding concentrations of does. And then eventually the bucks start to show up, because, the problem is if you're focused on, buck bedding and those kinds of things all the time, then you're going to notice that during the rut, buck bedding areas change, and those patterns that you had, figured out earlier in the season,
Yeah,
they're going to be
pretty useless. They're on a mission to be with those does. They're just going to bed in whatever ditch is closest.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's why
that's interesting.
I don't really even, I have, like, for my own hunting mainly, I'll have cameras out for particular deer, and I'll have a certain amount just for myself when I'm doing my earlier season hunting. But most of our cameras, we switch from summer right into rut areas, and I could care less about getting buck pictures till like closer to late October.
And I know you said for your personal hunting, this is something that Jared and I have really kind of tuned into as well. As I think that we've had a lot more opportunities at harvesting mature bucks in that October 19th to 27th time frame. That tends to be that sweet spot, whether it's the first big cold front coming through or just the more consistency and frequency on scrapes.
I think the 25th is one of my new favorite days.
23, 24, 25 are usually banging days.
Not to interrupt you, but in October, what you have is you don't have very many does in heat, but the bucks are, they've built up enough testosterone, and they know that the does are going to come in at any time. So there's just a constant cruising going on at that, for that maybe 1 week window of the year, when almost every buck, some people disagree with me and say mature bucks wait till later November. I
disagree.
That's definitely not true. But it's the greatest time, in my opinion, to be in the woods when the bucks are at their most active, peak of the rut. Just because when a buck gets on a doe, he shuts right down. Once he finds a doe and he doesn't have any need to be cruising anymore. So you hit that window just right when bucks are nose to the ground, balls to the wall, just constantly moving. That's why I love that late October part.
I think it's the best time to kill a particular buck. I think when you get into the rut, you've got a great chance of killing a buck, but trying to focus on a particular buck is extremely difficult.
Hit the fan yet. They're still like in their general core area, checking all the doe groups that are right
hitting scrapes.
That's why I think that's it makes perfect sense that. And I've got an area I'm thinking of, the East Wind, or Jeremy is like, I've got just a doe group that is just constantly like back forth, ridge to this food source, like always. And it just seems like almost always, and I can think of other places on our farm and places that we've hunted that are this way, is like those bucks know where those does are spending so much time. And so when October 20th rolls around, they go and they put their stamp on that spot. They're like, I'm gonna come back here, and I might not do it every day, but like I'm ready to go. Sooner or later, one of these does that's frequenting this spot is gonna be ready to go. I'm gonna come keep on fresh in my scent, and that's why I think those scrapes during that time frame on maybe not those destination and food sources, but more of those staging areas where the does are coming out early in the day. That's one of the best spots to key in on. Especially after a rain, obviously.
People think that's too early to get into like a rut mode, but like you said, maybe every year it's a few days different or something like that. But say roughly October 20th, you can literally start to hunt around does then. Because for sure bucks are starting to seek out does. They're not breeding that much. There's not much chasing going on, but they're definitely checking. They're going from doe group to doe group, monitoring, also what those does are doing. And basically you can just sit on a pocket of does and eventually it's going to happen.
I think sign is so critical that time of year, because and you have to be in there actively looking for it too, because you could go in October 10th and they're like, I don't know, there's nothing here. But if you go in October 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th, if
they're literally popping
you're monitoring
up every
the area
day.
and you've got especially sizable, you get a sizable rub that shows up near one of these primary doe areas that I'm talking about. He's in there. He's going to come in. That's why deer get killed off rub lines. That's why deer get killed off of scrapes. It's that time of year, and it's that sequence that I think is producing it.
Steve, have you looked at that kind of let's say area relevancy of some of these bucks once they start that process of checking out these doe groups? Like, do they start to shift where they're bedding to be closer to them so they can check them more frequently, or are they traveling longer distances to get there?
I find something like 90% of those bucks will completely shift their bedding areas closer to doe bedding areas. I even think some of them may bed in like the weirdest spots, but just stay downwind of that doe bedding area, because does at that time, they still don't want to be bothered. And I think the bucks know that, but they're just staying back.
They're like, okay, cool. That's cool.
I'll give you space. I'll give you your space.
We'll stay here. We'll stay here.
Yeah. You ready?
What's that? You ready to go? Can we go yet? Yeah. Waiting on a woman.
Yep. No, that's basically what's going on. And I call it the rut shift. And I'll even see it happen earlier than the 20th. Like last year, I saw a lot of bucks. It was even in the early to mid teens where, because I cluster cameras around buck bedding areas, and I can basically get a picture of a particular buck every day, almost on one of those cameras. Well, then all of a sudden, some of these bedding areas, literally that buck disappears. But then I already had cameras in rut areas that, bam, those bucks are showing up.
That's wild, man.
Dude, you want to hear something?
So that's how you know.
You want to hear something real weird, Steve? I still can't really explain this. Colton and I were hunting at my farm. Was that opening weekend when we had the encounter with that real nice 2-year-old? And we got into the stand at like, I don't know, 3 o'clock, maybe 4 o'clock. It was early. I mean, this is Ohio. So it's
end of September.
End of September. Yeah, it was like September 28th. And we're just getting into the stand. We're getting settled. And I hear like a crazy chase. Like we hear leaves crunching, and I hear a buck grunt, and like, rah, rah. I'm like, what is happening? Sure enough, here comes this doe sprinting down the hill, across from us, and it was like a forkhorn or a small spike or something was chasing, like full out chasing her, chased her out into like
myself. Yep. I don't know for sure if she's in heat or not. Like there are documented studies where does have come into heat about almost that time. I mean, it could definitely possibly be, but then I also think there's some bucks that are just more aggressive, and I don't mean to say it, more horny than other bucks too. So, that he's just dying to get the job done, and he may have come on that doe, but she could have very well been in heat too. It's hard to say.
I do think that growing up, it was always like, November. Like, when you get to November, it's breeding season. And really, even that first week to 10 days in November, I think now looking at it more in terms of, and I'm not saying in terms of like peak breeding, but in terms of successful hunting of the rut, the last 10 days of October and the latest we can possibly push it in Pennsylvania at the end, those middle two, when you get into lockdown, man, it sucks.
Yep. And if you look, I'll be posting our trail camera study, hopefully within, be finalized within a month, but you'll watch the graph, and the best buck activity is basically from October 24th to like November 3rd. And then it's just a dead zone until like around the 13th or 14th of November.
And that's what we've been seeing on our cameras and stuff.
Dude, I mean, that describes like my evolution of understanding the rut. I hated it for a long time because everybody would say November, first week of November, or second week of November. It's one of the two. And then we'd get all geared up for these trips, and I would go do it, and I'm like, I don't see anything, dude. Like,
it's dead.
Every once in a while, you'll get, like, if you're in them, you're in them. If you're not, you're not, is what they'll say.
Yep.
But I've had to learn the hard way over however many years I've been hunting, 15 years or whatever, that it is not as climactic, I don't think, as I had hoped it would be. Those 2 weeks specifically. It really just isn't. It's not like the deer are like, November 1st, like, let's freaking go.
Versus it in October. If you catch that first one coming in, I mean, it's wild.
You just have you have to just understand that this is a process that starts like September 1st when they shed this velvet, and goes all the way through, like in some cases, mid to end of December. Of seeking and of like coming in and out of cycles, and like there's a lot of evolving food sources and weather patterns that happens throughout that. You just really have to pick and choose your shots if you can, and if you're traveling, you just you do what you can.
Go with the flow. One thing too, October cold fronts, it can be any time in October.
Yep.
Dynamite opportunities. Like if there's a cold front, unless it's your funeral, you should be out there.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to say it, but that's
you're right.
Like, I hate it, when there's like weddings and stuff in October. Like I don't mean to be greedy or not have my priorities right, but
you better hope it's not.
You got them right. I was fortunate to have my priorities right before I got married, because I told my wife before we got married, I said, listen, if it's in October or November, just count me out. Like I'm not going. Like, and all my friends, I'm like, just don't invite me to stuff. I won't be there.
I won't be there.
Sorry, I love you. I won't be there.
Won't be there.
Check this out, Steve. Here's something I've seen. I've had really, and I think I'm kind of unique. And I haven't heard a lot of people doing this. Not that I've killed a ton of bucks this way, but I have come close. The way my farm sets up is we get a lot of summer. A lot of bucks living on our farm in the summer, and most guys will look at that and say, well, that's bad. It means your habitat's not, conducive to fall, herds, and you're not going to be able to control the herd in that way. Yeah. And in a lot of ways, that is true. I see the weaknesses there, so I'm trying to offset that. However, because these bucks are here in the summer already, I can continue building habitat and supplying food sources that keeps them there longer.
Sure.
The best way that I've seen is soybeans. I think alfalfa would be probably as good, but so I plant my soybeans probably several weeks after a lot of the farmers plant them, and just because of the nature of we're using the real
forage
world
beans.
Yep. I don't think they are technically a forage bean, but whatever.
Yeah.
I've got really green soybeans well into October, third week of October, and because of that, because the bucks are already there. They stay. Sure. And so if I get cold weather, I can hunt some green beans for the first 2-3 weeks of the season pretty successfully.
And that's when your bucks are still holding there.
And then immediately after that, it's October 25th, and we're
they're ranging too then.
Yeah.
One thing too, though, and I mean, I don't own land, but I just see it in different areas. Like when bucks shed their velvet, and they're breaking up from bachelor groups, and this is mainly mature bucks, is what you'll see is it's more bedding issues than it is feeding. Like every buck in a certain area will feed in the same oak ridge, but not every buck is going to bed in the same thicket. And the mature bucks tend to want to have their space when it comes to bedding.
Yep.
So maybe in some properties, you're getting deer to come in at night, or but you just don't have the right bedding for all those mature bucks, or maybe just one. But that's what I see. I think the bedding is an even bigger issue than the food, because like I keep saying, they'll come in to feed in the middle of the night somewhere from a mile or two away.
I think that's why I think you're just proving my point. It's because, and it's a weakness come fall, because all these cool season grasses and stuff, in November, non-existent. It's just a bare pasture. But in, September and even into October, I mean, these are 4 or 5 foot tall.
Yeah, pasture grasses.
Just thick. So there's an overabundance of, summer bedding.
Well, even corn standing on your property, and then that gets harvested.
But because I've got that, holding up through October, and I've got this green food source to supplement them, it's I can extend this patternable season that they're in.
Steve, are you seeing, when you talk about those mature bucks and bedding, are you seeing mature bucks in the big woods up there using the same bedding area in the summer, only to then basically one occupies that as fall range transitions and that the other one moves off?
It really, in my opinion, and from what I've seen, depends on the size of the bedding area.
Okay.
And it also depends on how many vantage points and actual beds are in that spot. Like if it's just a really prime spot where it can host multiple bucks and they can spread out, then you'll have more that stick around. But in most cases, it tends to really be one buck, maybe two at the most, sticking around.
I was going to say, from some of your
the biggest, most dominant buck that stays there.
From some of your photos that I'm seeing, which again, looking at them, seem like very mature, dominant bucks, and it seems like even now it's just him in the photo. There's no bucks sitting behind him. There's nobody else hanging off to the side. It's just him.
Yep. And actually, that's another thing too, is I find a lot of real old bucks, 6, 7, 8-year-old bucks, they don't bachelor group as much as, younger bucks. Not saying they never do, but some bucks, doesn't matter the time of the year, they just stay to themselves. And I think that's what you're seeing in some of my photos. I don't think it's anything other than that buck doesn't trust any other deer. He feels like other deer are going to be an influence to danger or possibly, lead him to his last day. So he only trusts himself. He's learned all himself, how to survive and how to get away from hunters, that he's just going to stick to himself and do his thing. And that deer there is a pretty tough one to kill.
I think my take on that is, it seems more like they use deer as a temperature gauge, essentially for pressure, a pressure gauge is I guess what I should say. But like, it's not that they disassociate with deer completely from what I've seen. And obviously you're spending a lot more time in the woods than I am, so tell me if I'm wrong. But from what I've seen is, like, if a buck is secluded or appears secluded in a trail camera picture, typically they're not that far. Like, they're close enough to be able to see the rest of, like, that's why if I'm hunting a food plot or something and all these other deer come in, the buck is there. Hanging. He's there. He's just watching. He's just hanging back and waiting for one of them to get keyed up, and then he's like, oh.
Yeah, I knew it.
And listening too. Absolutely. He knows that, his safest hour is when the sun goes down. And he's just staying back and waiting to see if anything happens until his time when he feels safe to come out.
That's why it's that's why it's so important. You get a couple does in the field. It's like, that's the most critical part of your hunt. Like, if that buck's coming, he's probably watching these does now.
Don't booger them.
Yep.
Yeah,
yep, exactly.
Well,
I'll just bring it up. Getting in the rut, like talking about some of these older, more dominant, mature bucks. I'll even see like where they won't come out into like a doe feeding area, or what they'll do is they'll grab a doe and take her somewhere where they feel safe, and also
you want to go someplace
safe,
and
maybe get away from other bucks.
Yeah, well,
how's that for a pickup line? Want to go someplace safe?
Yeah. Dude, the get away from other bucks is the number one thing that I've seen. Like, I've watched several bucks that I would assume are 5 and older, and they instantly like cut it away from the other deer and try to wrangle her back. And I think it's because then all of a sudden, this 3-year-old or this 2-year-old gets wind, and it's just satellite harassment the entire time. And then he's spending energy chasing them off instead of paying attention to her.
It is funny to see sometimes it does seem like their urge to like show that they're the boss is almost stronger than their urge to breed.
It is.
I've snort wheezed some bucks off of does because they just can't take it. They can't take the fact that somebody would challenge them in that way.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to kill. And that's where that late October period, those vocalizations and calling to me have been the most effective to get one of these mature bucks to screw up.
Did you say a time frame?
Late October period.
Well, dude, that's what we rattled Corey's buck in, and it. He might have known something was up, but it was he couldn't. He's like, there was a buck fighting in here. I've got to show him what's up.
The buck I killed last year, October 28th, I was blind running, and I do that a lot. I have success. It can also backfire too, though, because most bucks come
because you turn around and they're like,
But what helped me is the buck came in downwind. And but I had does upwind of me. So he got downwind of me, spooks and runs like 50 yards. He literally just turns around, and I know what he was thinking. He just said, you know what? Heck with it. There's does over there. He turns right back around.
For it.
I never even had to grunt at him. And he goes right under my stand heading towards those does, and I shoot him. But he did not want another buck in that area being around those does. He knew there was a human there. He knew because he smelled me. And he was willing to, at that point, risk his life because that's how fired up he was knowing another buck was by those does.
That's how I've killed bucks that are locked down with does. I killed one a few years ago on the mountain. There's probably a 4-year-old buck that went up at Jason's place. And that buck, I just got in the stand and I look over and I could see this tree because I blind call all the time. And I rattled or grunted, blind called. And I see this tree just going. I'm like, what the hell? And I was like, that has to be a buck rubbing that tree. the doe ends up coming into me.
Or it's an Amish kid over there cutting down
cutting down something.
I've had that experience more recently.
Yeah. Is that a buck or an Amishman? No, it was a buck. And he comes.
What is that blue shade of blue?
He comes straight in, and like she's oblivious, right? When a doe's in heat, like she's oblivious to stuff. She's not paying attention. She's clouded head too, and he sees me, and basically ends up doing this huge loop the whole way around, and she's under my stand, and he will not leave her. And he knew that I was in there, yet he still committed 10 yards, and I killed him. Mm-hmm. He could not leave that doe while she was there. Yep.
It's eye-opening to see that kind of thing. Not to beat this into the ground here, but another example of that is like when if I get a small buck underneath of me, or any doe really, or I'm sorry, any deer really, but especially like a small buck, that's, in my opinion, one of the best times to crack the horns. Like a lot of guys are afraid to like scare them off. They almost never care.
Those 1-year-olds are just like,
they'll look at you. So if I can crack the horns, if I can get a buck to see someone else,
he's committing.
Even if he's like not going to
decoy.
Even if he's not going to challenge that buck, he's like, okay.
And that's the hard part about blind calling, because I mean, I've lost a couple where even when I've called, like they come in and they check up and they're like, "Yep, nothing."
Yeah.
Like I don't see anything, I don't smell anything, I don't sense anything. Like that's something wrong. I'm out. You know,
but at least you got to have an encounter.
That's it, man. You're in the game at least at that point. But it is an interesting time there to kind of think about how to, like, when to call, when not to call. You know, I know a lot of guys who will not blind call. They will not call until they lay eyes on a deer. And I probably blind call more than I call when I see a deer.
Absolutely. I've killed probably at least 6 or 8 bucks in that late October period, all blind calling. I've only ever killed 2 or 3 bucks in my life that I grunted in once I saw them.
Yeah.
They're just like turkeys. Like a lot of times they'll look, and if they don't see nothing, they'll go the other way.
Yeah, especially if you call at them and they don't see anything, then they're really boogering out of there.
You know who got me into like, blind calling was Lauer.
Oh, really?
Mike Lauer. And not only blind calling, but ripping and roaring. I've just got the Magnum buck roar, which freaking everybody should have, because there's so many junk tubes out there that like, you blow too hard and it sounds like a chicken or something.
Yeah.
This Magnum buck roar, I think Primos makes it.
It is.
You can just rip on that thing and it sounds like a buck.
Yeah, it sounds like a mature. It's got the snort wheeze on the top.
And I try even in blind calling to make it sound like an aggressive roar, almost with like intermittent running and grunting, as almost if they're chasing something around I've had some really good luck with that.
Yeah. And you're the louder you are, the more your sound's traveling too. So you're just, extending your distance to get more bucks to hear you.
Well, and that's it. I mean, think about it in like a late October or early November time period, and it's a little bit of wind in those woods and stuff. Man, I've been blowing grunt calls at deer, and whether they don't want to look at me or they just can't hear me, I mean, it's like you're ripping at that thing, and it's just, he's just going, and until you crack antlers or something, he doesn't hear anything.
Steve, how many guys do you have show up to camp? You're like, make sure you bring your rattling antlers, and they pull out their little ticklers. They got these little 4 points. They're like, oh, I'm ready to go.
Yep. No, I mean, not putting any guys down, but we could do a whole new podcast on things like that. Trust me. I've dealt.
We probably should.
99% have been great guys, but I've seen just about everything in the book when it comes to that comical kind of stuff.
I love it.
Do you have because I'll say it, I'm one that I'm impatient for sure. Do you have guys that like by 9:30 they're like texting you like, all right, Steve, like I'm not seeing anything. You're gonna like yank me out?
Yep. And I mean, I want the person to have a good time. I never force anyone to do anything, so they can quit at any time they want. But I mean, I just feel bad that, they're hunting the rut too, when basically in the rut, there is no hour in the day on most days, unless it's, maybe real warm or something, when bucks aren't moving. So you can't feel like, well, it's 9 o'clock, the deer aren't going to move. I mean, you could even sleep in till 10 and kill a buck at 2, no problem in the rut. So, they have to, be putting their hours in. But then again, if someone, isn't having a good time and they only want to do a couple hours here and there, then that does
That's what
occasionally happen.
I think my scold / compliment to you would be like, you like to get down, but you're always hunting. Even, and when you get down, you just always got to be aware of what's happening.
Well, I'm just, if I get down, I'm looking for like, am I going somewhere else? Am I moving cameras? Am I thinking about next situation? Like, yeah.
Yeah, and this buck you killed over here was a perfect example.
I want to dive into some of that more. I got to take a pee, though, real quick.
Me too.
Okay.
Refreshed. So I guess, Steve, when I guess one of the things I kind of wanted to see, because I won't say that a lot of outfitters don't do it, but I would think, and maybe you'll laugh at this, but I think you're fairly transparent about the bucks that you're posting on your social media that you're getting on camera.
Oh, God, yeah.
So, because I mean, like, I look at some of them, like, man, if he's hiding a bigger one than this, like, holy shit. But if you think about it, when guys are coming in, this is one of the things outfitters always tell me they have a tough time is like, what are the expectations, or what expectations do you lay out for the guys coming to hunt with your guide service? Because they're coming in and they're like, well, yeah, dude, I want to kill that giant white 8.
Yeah. Well, rarely do we target or I'm not going to say. You get guys that will say, Steve, I like this particular deer. I don't even care if I don't see it, but just to know that we're hunting it, put me in that area wherever you think he might be. And it is what it is. Like, you get a little bit of that, but I mean, and another thing is, and maybe it's a little bit of a problem, but I don't mind it, is most of my clients, they don't even have like high expectations. A lot of guys are really happy with like 100-inch deer. And I've thought about, maybe I shouldn't allow that. But then again, I am the type of person that believes, like, I love to trophy hunt, don't get me wrong, but I don't believe that hunting should just be trophy hunting. And I never want to start telling people that, hey, you know what, that's not a good deer to take, or I just want everyone to enjoy hunting.
Mm-hmm.
And it might even make my business look a little bad when you see a 100-inch buck shot, or sometimes even less. But this is a business that, like I said, the past 3 years, I'm fully booked, and I really don't think that's going to change for quite some time. That these guys just keep coming back. So as long as my clients are happy and it's a successful business, then I'm just going to keep it going the way it is. So
I think that's a good point, man. I mean, ultimately, first of all, let's not take away, and I know a lot of people will go, well, that's good for Pennsylvania deer, this and that, but it is Pennsylvania ground. It is public land. And I mean, so to go out and hike in on some of this like heavy mountain country, and kill a 100-inch 3-year-old or whatever, like, that's still a good accomplishment, especially in this state.
Yep. And I'll be honest, I'm not making excuses, but I would say if somebody's never killed a mature deer, more with a bow than anything, but if you've never even had like a good encounter, and then you do have that first encounter, most of the time you don't connect. Like, I see a lot of that. Like, I've had quite a few hunters over the years that never even, I'm not getting guys out from the Midwest that see 150 inchers every year. Like, most of my clients are from the New England states, where a 6-point that might score 40 inches as a shooter.
Right.
So, when these guys see a 100-incher, it's a really good deer, let alone when a 140 does come by, a lot of them get pretty shook up too.
Yeah.
So,
well, and I mean, and Steve, not to put you on the spot, but obviously I think you've built history probably with a lot of these big mature bucks that you are posting out there and that you are seeing. So they're even giving you the slip, right? I mean, ultimately, they're not just slipping the public land hunter. They're giving everybody, including you, which probably has the best beat on them, the slip.
And like, score wise, and I'm not huge on score. Any deer that I know is mature, I would shoot, even if it was a 100-incher. But like, I don't even pass up a 120. Like, if a 3-year-old 120 comes by, and I'm not making excuses, but guiding limits your time and your abilities. It's just getting harder and harder anymore. Like, I used to have some of the best stretch of late October all to myself. Now, this year, late October, I'm just smashed with guys. So like, I feel like, anymore, if I see a 120, which is still a really good buck in PA and on public land, I'll never be a time in the near future when I even pass up a 120, when I know of bucks like last year. I had a few in the 170s pushing 180, on camera. But when you're guiding, it's very hard to just, cut it in half and me focus for myself and guide. And so, my expectations aren't probably what some people think they are.
Is there any aspect of like, all right, guys, we're taking, Dad's going to take you guys over here, and I'm going to take you guys to this general area. Here are some of the bucks I've been getting pictures of in the area. Let's try to target these, or is it just kind of like, if you see a deer you like, give them a crack?
I mean, I have said, these are the deer that we even show them, trail camera pictures are the easiest way to get a guy in a certain stand. When you say, that camera that's in front of your stand, this is what's been on there the past 2 weeks. And when they see that and it's good, I mean, it's like a chicken with their head cut off running to that stand. But it still doesn't matter. A lot of these guys are here for 3 days. So, they know that, this might even be limited time, their only time to hunt mainly throughout the rest of the season. And it's very hard, like I said, to get it in people's heads to hold out. But it's somewhat my fault, if it is a fault, that I just, I'm not even pushing it. Number one is a happy client. As long as it's all legal, they're willing to hunt ethically and legally. I don't care what they shoot, and I don't think I'm ever going to change that. I really do think that I could, have my even more restrictions than what we do have in Pennsylvania, and I think we could kill even more bigger deer and better deer. But there's just like a line that I feel like and maybe it's more for my own image and just who I am, that I never want to be someone, whether I'm guiding or talking to anyone, that, hey man, you shouldn't shoot that deer. You should hold out. You should be a trophy hunter. As much as we love trophy hunting, there's more to hunting than trophy hunting. That's kind of the bottom line.
If I can, I think it's important to, just to point out, and I want to essentially defend the right for somebody to create an environment, whether it's on a piece of property that they own or in a guide service that they're running, where essentially you do have the ability to kind of dictate how you'd like to impact the deer herd with hunting. And so while I'm 100% in agreement with you, hunting is way more than trophy hunting. Lots of people, hunters, can't even relate to this conversation because they just want to spend as much time in the woods as possible. That is hunting to them. But at the same time, and I experienced this on our piece of property in Ohio, is like, I think that trophy hunting sometimes gets a bad rap, and like, it's not that I want to say, well, you're less of a hunter, or no, you can't come hunt with us because, you're not willing to target these specific deer. However, I think it's perfectly okay, given the resources, that you try to protect certain animals and say, listen, you're welcome to, I respect you as a hunter to go and do this wherever you want. But in this specific scenario, we're trying to get deer to a certain age class, and so to do that, we ask that you respect our wishes as the owner of the property to do X, Y, Z.
Yep. I think that's though mainly, and I think if I owned my own land, I think I would be that way.
Yeah.
But like, I'm once again, not bragging, but I think you guys see that there's no shortage of me being able to find mature big bucks. If a few do get killed in an area, the off season, I'll find more somewhere else. And I do think on public land, it's just a little harder to have that mindset and kind of be a big part of your business. And I'm also not against somebody doing that either.
Sure.
But it's more about who I am as a hunter and as a person. Like, I stand back from my beliefs, and basically I want happy hunters, and I want all hunters to know that, hey, you know what? Whatever you do legally and ethically, I'm your friend, and I stand behind that. That's kind of my outlook.
Yeah, I
think definitely private land, I think, is a different ball game, and I think it's a great idea to manage it differently.
Where I'm coming at that conversation from. And yeah, I acknowledge there's a big difference, I think, between public and private land. And certainly, I mean, dude, there's lots of situations where Jeremy and I will go out, and when we go to Illinois this year with Corey on public land, even though one of them is a lease, my gut, we haven't talked about this, but my feeling is we'll say, hey man, you see a buck you like, you know, you give him a crack.
That's what I'll tell my dad.
There's plenty of these out here, but so we definitely will do that. But I really am against this culture that looks at people who set a standard for themselves or for their property, for their group of guys, and say, you know, you can't do that. Like we're all hunters, and like you have to see that like it's okay to set standards for yourself.
Oh, absolutely.
And to take that a step further, if I set a goal for myself to kill a 4-year-old, a mature buck, a certain classification of animal, and I mess up and I don't achieve that, I shoot a smaller animal or something. Not that there's anything wrong with that inherently, but it's okay for me to be disappointed with the fact that I didn't reach my goal. And there's some people that, you know, I've hunted with that just can't understand what they think is wrong, that I'm disappointed with the end result. They think it's morally wrong.
Yeah, I think that's tough. I mean, because like I know my goal in almost every state, I'm always looking for a big buck, which usually coincides with a mature deer. But my goal is to kill a mature deer. And in Pennsylvania, that's probably a 4-year-old. You know, not that I wouldn't take a crack at a big 3-year-old. You know, that might differ than in Kansas, where I'm looking for a 4 or 5-year-old for sure. I'm not going to shoot that.
And it's okay to have fluid goals even throughout the season, or even a hunt.
Yeah, I mean, we get to January and the clock's ticking in Pennsylvania. The first good buck I see is probably getting shot. You know, and that's just because I want to kill a good buck here. You know, and it doesn't mean that my overall goals have changed, or that I wouldn't be disappointed that I didn't achieve that goal earlier in the year for what I was aiming for. But it's just, you know, it has to evolve. It has to move and change differently. It's hard for people to understand that. I mean,
people are just real sensitive. It's hard for some people to accept that it's okay for people to have different goals within the same activity.
Absolutely. Yep. Like, you know, some people would say, Steve, well, it doesn't make sense because you support the antler restriction and, you know, basically, you know, all you do is talk about big deer and post big deer, but that's all based on me. That's not based on anyone else's opinion. I have my own goals, and I'm okay if someone's goal is, hey, I'll shoot any legal buck. As long as you fill your tag, do it legally, and I don't see you out there trying to shoot another one.
Yeah.
Hey, congratulations. I'm proud of you.
Well, and in fairness, like, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but like if you had a bunch of maybe your current hunters or guys that wanted to come hunt with you that were like, man, Steve, we really want to, like, we've seen potential here. We really want to try to shoot like some 150 pluses, like, you know, consistently. And you've got these guys in camp who are consistently shooting whatever, 2-year-olds, and what you may feel some pressure because of, you know, your business to say, you know, okay, let's maybe try to do a little less of this, you know, like let's encourage the hunters that are shooting smaller bucks to grow in that regard. And I don't say grow, but you know what I mean? Like, shoot bigger, shoot bigger deer.
Well, and like another thing though, like, and I'll be honest with you, like we kind of separate, we're talking hundreds of thousands of acres here.
Yeah. We
have areas that we don't put hunters that will shoot anything.
Yep.
Because we know, you know,
I'm familiar with the strategy.
You know, like we have areas where we'll put hunters hey, this guy will shoot anything. There's a bunch of bucks in here. This is an area we don't care. But then we have our big buck areas that, you know, and I mean, I don't think I'm wrong for being like that, but we do at times split people up because I just feel like there's so much area here that we can do that. Plus, just because we have you in an area that we are mainly just targeting some smaller bucks, it's the big woods, it's the rut. Like big buck could easily come by too, though.
Well,
so
like
we do have that strategy.
Like you said too, man, your main objective is keeping your clients happy. And if you perceive that them shooting any buck is going to make them happy, you're doing your job.
Yep. That's something we ask everyone. It's not like we don't just like draw names from a hat and say, you go here. And I say, what are you expecting out of this hunt?
Yeah.
And I'll even have guys, I kid you not, like, Steve, I hunt Maine or Vermont, and I'm lucky to see 5 deer a season. All I want, Steve, is just to have action, see deer. So the goal of the hunt, then I got stands that we see deer more out of than others. I might just do that because that's all that guy really cared about. Doesn't mean that he wouldn't have an opportunity, but my main thing is I ask you what you're expecting and I try to meet your expectations.
It's a funny role as the hunter going into a guide serve. Have you ever hunted with a guide?
No.
Never have? Okay. I have twice.
Once in Illinois.
Once in Illinois, and I went on an elk hunt.
That's right.
The elk hunt was a long time ago. I don't think this happened, but with the Illinois hunt, I can remember specifically like trying to figure out how I should like act around the outfitter to like let him know that I was like looking to kill a big buck, and that I was like competent.
Because there are guys in that camp that would kill pretty much any big 2, low 3-year-old.
Yep. So I was trying to like virtue signal to him that I was like competent at aging deer on the hoof, and like and I felt like I proved myself because I passed a really nice like 140-inch 3-year-old the first morning.
Yeah.
He's like, "You passed that deer?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Okay."
Now you're up. Now you're taking a step up.
And so I could see like my points with the outfitter like ranking, and yeah.
It is tough though. I mean, because everybody's expectations are different. Like you said, those guys coming from the big woods, who don't see any deer, you put them in a stand and they see a bunch of 2-year-old bucks and maybe 10 does, and it's like, man, that was the best morning of hunting I've ever had in my life.
Exactly.
I
had a guy, not to interrupt you, I had a guy last year from Vermont. He killed a buck, just like 100-incher, but he'd never seen an 8-point, and he's hunted all his life. And it was a little slow start for him, but then midway into the hunt, he did a 6-day hunt. We really got into some good action. He saw like 5 different 8-points one morning. The next morning he kills one, but I've never seen someone like so thrilled. Like for me, I'd be excited, but that's what I mean. Not everyone's at the same level. Not everyone has the same background, doesn't come from the same place, the same areas. So there's, different hunters all throughout the country, and we all kind of, I keep bringing up the expectations, but we kind of are in our own bubble here when really there's all different kinds of hunters out there.
Sure.
I think, not to like beat this thing into the ground, but like it's really important to have your expectations match where you're. I think geography probably is one of the biggest influencers here, but like, so all these instances that I'm talking about is my personal experience on my farm. I've got guys, not a whole lot of them, a small group of guys. One of them comes from like New York, and his argument for why he wants to shoot these smaller deer, he's like, man, in New York, like this is a giant, like this is the best deer I've seen all year. And I'm like, okay, I can see that, but look at all these trail camera pictures of giants that I've got here. And what I'm asking is that you adjust your scale to where we're at here.
Yeah.
It's like,
and it's hard, man.
It's like walking into a kindergarten class and be like, I'm going to ace all the tests. Like, of course you are. Like,
yeah. But the problem is you're getting guys who are coming in, much like we started this podcast with, that just, they don't live deer hunting outside of deer season.
Exactly.
Sure. There's that too.
And so the concept of what you're trying to make them do is like I don't even know, like, where are you even coming around with this? Like, we haven't even been in the woods yet, and you're already telling me what not to shoot.
Yep.
100%. And it's like, no, dude, I've lived in the woods since you stopped hunting last year.
100%. One thing I wanted to ask you, Steve, was you strike me as somebody probably who is very, it's easy for you to tell one deer from another. Like if you got trail camera pictures, like, oh, that's, it's Alan or whatever, whatever, however you're naming these deer or not. It's easy for you to differentiate. Isn't it crazy, like kind of eye-opening actually, to show how difficult it is for some people who, in my experience, are pretty decent hunters to identify some deer. Some people just, and I'm fortunately, like, not in a braggadocious way, it's easy for me.
You see him and you're like, yep, that's him.
And even in the field, I'm like, that's freaking so-and-so right away. And it's easy for me most times. Sometimes 8 points are tricky, but and then I'll show them to, I mean, dude, even my uncle, who's, arguably a better bow hunter than I am, he really struggles to be like, is that deer?
The only time I struggled is when we first started hunting Kansas, and we were getting pictures of deer, and we're like, okay, I know these deer. And then I would see one in the field, and I'm like, oh man, that must be whatever, Super 7. And I'd look, and I'm like, no, that's that deer. And I'm like, holy shit, Super 7 is big, you know?
And I'm not saying I've never been fooled before, because definitely I
wasn't used to seeing a deer that's 300 pounds on the hoof, you know? And so when you're looking at him in the camera, he looks right. Like, he looks normal. Then you see him on the hoof, you're like, geez, like, I can't believe that's it. But, I mean, I think that when you start to look at it, and I guess, Steve, you kind of said there that, you know, you're not a huge guy on the score side, but, I mean, what do you think is the biggest deer that you've seen, you know, hunting in those mountains?
Oh, I mean, 170s, 180-ish. I mean, I've never seen a 200-incher. I don't even think there's a 200-incher wherever in all the ground that, you know, that I have up here. But every year I see at least something in the 160s. You know, last year, the one buck I call Crazy 12, he ended up getting wounded, and long story short, someone found him, you know, like after Christmas or whatever. But I got to hold his antlers, and that's a deer I saw a few times last year, and he scored 179 and 4/8. That's gross.
That's a giant.
I mean, I've seen many 150 plus. I can tell you that.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I think
I'm not talking like out of my stand every year either.
Yeah. No,
300 days a year in the woods, you're bound to see some good deer.
But I think what's interesting about that is we were talking to our buddy Chris Duncan a couple of weeks ago on the podcast, who's in Iowa, like in the heat of it, in what you would consider south central, southeastern Iowa. And I don't know if Chris is seeing things much better than, you know, we would see. It's in a more compacted deer area.
There's more of.
Yeah.
I don't know though.
Yeah.
He's telling you that there's not.
Yeah, I don't know. I can only speak of even this area too. I've been able to, you know, talk with a lot of different hunters from a lot of different places, and I don't want to say we're as good as Iowa, but I do think it's surprisingly how many big deer we have now,
I think the numbers are the same. It's just there's more area where Steve's at than less deer area where Chris is at. It's more farmland. There's not as much cover. Yeah. It's just bare field.
It's kind of what's
where he's got 100,000 acres of timber.
It's kind of what I was going to say is like
deer.
It seems like they're more areas where they're more visible. It's the perception is that there's just more of them.
And I don't think that there is more in Iowa than there would be. And
you know, and in fairness, I don't hunt here, so I don't really have a. I can't really stake my claim on a statement.
I mean, it would sound like there's more.
But clearly, like you guys have both killed some great ones here in the state. Like, no doubt there are. Some of them.
Well, that's why I kind of asked Steve what he was seeing, because I mean, I'm on a 150 plus every year here on that property on the mountain, and I mean, it's probably very similar to what Steve's hunting in that, you know, mountainous, big timber, some open ground. But I mean, you know, last year was on a 170 for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't say in the past 5 years, I've always had at least some 150 deer or better on camera.
Yeah.
Not my freezer, but
yeah, that's a whole different ball game at that point.
Yep, but it's just exciting to know that, you know, I would have never guessed this. I mean, I'm 35 now, but say when I started hunting when I was 12, never in my life would I have guessed that we'd have deer like we have now. This is just unbelievable.
It's been a huge transformation. I mean, I think that goes back to your Gary Alt point. Like when that came in and that change came in, and even in the first 4 or 5 years, like I got why people were angry, because things don't just change in 4 or 5 years, right? It just doesn't change on its head. You know, now we're 20 years into this thing. I mean, it was in the 2001, 2002 timeframe when these big antler restriction changes came in and doe harvest and stuff like that. So we're 20 years into this thing, and we have surely flipped it on its head. In fact, I think last year there were, or 2 years ago, there was a couple 190s killed. You know, there's the guy up in Tioga County killed that giant we talked with Matt about with his traditional bow.
Yeah.
I mean, they're killing big bucks in the state, and people are seeing them. I mean, this is if the deer lived, right, which I don't know yet. I haven't laid eyes on them since last season. You know, I'll be hunting a deer that's probably 6 or 7 years old, probably 170 to 180. And this is like the 4th year I've tried to hunt that deer, you know, and it's just, they do exist out there. It's just, you got to put in the work. If you think you're going to, people will walk right off the road and they'll end up shooting a 150 and think they're the greatest hunter in the world. That's luck, and that's part of deer hunting. But I mean, if you want to consistently be on deer, you got to work for it.
And you got to run trail cameras.
That's it, man. Yeah, I mean, you're not going to see them.
Cameras tell you more than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to just go out and see them in a field or spotlight them or something. It's just not. It's not possible in some of these areas.
Oh, that's a good point. Do you do much of that?
Not a whole lot. I mean, we don't even have fields here. It's all big woods. And I don't want to say that I don't spot. I mean, in the summer months, maybe 4 or 5 times a month, my son and I will go spotting, but you can easily go a 20-mile stretch and not even see a deer spotting in these woods. It's like I said, if it's a lot different, than what, if you've never hunted big woods, it's just different than, and I'm not saying you guys haven't, but for some of the listeners, it's just big woods is not like, farm country where every night you look in the fields and there's all the deer. I mean, the deer, a lot of the deer anymore tend to stay away from the roads because there's no reason to be hanging out by the roads. They're going to stay back secluded and in the deeper woods, or at least a few hundred yards in.
Mm-hmm. Has it have those road networks changed at all with gas wells and stuff going in? Do you think that's made it more accessible to get into some of those places up there?
Yep, I think it's definitely there's tons of access here, but I also, some people think that hurts hunting. I think it kind of helps because whenever you do that kind of activity, it always creates better habitat.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, there's areas where there's just 300-yard squares of woods just in between, all these. Did I lose you a second?
Yeah, you're good.
You're good.
Hold on. Let me just fix this real quick because I have my phone plugged in and it's saying low battery and I don't know why. I hate to say that I might lose you in a while.
No, you're fine. We can get there up. Well, I wondered even too with and again, I know numbers seem to decreasing of pressure and stuff, but essentially when you create those greater road networks, it could actually spread people out a little bit better too, because you think about when it used to be like, oh, here's these 2 or 3 pull-offs on this road that people are hunting. I mean, they were packed and everybody departed from that single spot.
Yep. No, actually, the more parking you have on public land, the more people will spread out because you notice everybody parks at the parking spots.
Yeah.
Now, getting into something else a little bit, you talked about Steve, how do you avoid people? Some of my parking spots aren't parking spots,
right?
But that's where you'll find that no one goes. I'll pull over into a ditch or just park in the weirdest spots, but just those kind of little things are where, you can get away from people.
Yeah, that's really what it is. And, I think those bucks have learned to do that, especially from their main home ranges and core areas, is to just be to where they know that they're safe and they're secure and they're not going to be disturbed and they have cover and they have water and food. You know, when you get to the rut, that's, thrown out the window. But I think it's important to understand just the process that goes in, because I think people would go to your Instagram and your social and look at it and be like, man, this guy's just in bucks all the time. You spend, I watched a podcast not too long ago, when you were shed hunting and stuff, you said something like you were doing 4 or 5 miles a day when you were doing shed hunts and stuff like that. Is that accurate?
Yep. Yeah. Oh, definitely. Or longer.
Yep. And I mean, when you go in and do those shed hunts, it sounds like you're in a particular buck's area and looking for that deer.
Yep. I'm not big into the numbers game of shed hunting. Now, I mean, I see a shed on the ground and it's a spike. I don't just leave it sit, but I like it. It's almost like you're hunting, or if say you fail on a certain buck, you don't get them. And then you go in the next year looking for his sheds. It's almost like you got them, or you still feel like you got a piece of them at least. And that's what I like to do, is target particular deer. I don't know if you guys ever heard of the one buck I used to hunt called Goliath. I got his sheds 2 out of 3 years. The buck Crazy 12 I was hunting, for a few years. I got his sheds 2 out of the 3 years. So it's just, especially in the big woods, like Goliath, he had a major amount of territory. His summer spot to his winter spot was 7 miles, is just as the crow flies. Jeez. That's over several mountains. So then to be able to get his sheds, I mean, that's just,
that's
you're
crazy.
Talking, you might have 5 days of shed hunting and nothing, and not even coming close to finding that deer sheds. And then when you do, it's just, it's almost as good as killing them, because it's really such a challenge, in the big woods, because there's just so much land, and some of these deer can roam.
Shed hunting is so crazy because it's just like,
Yep.
it's not a moving target. Like they're laying out there in the woods somewhere.
I mean, I'd argue that it's harder to find their sheds than it is to kill them sometimes.
I would agree to that.
Well, yeah. I think in the big woods settings, I'm really interested to hear, like, so on my farm, like in other places we've hunted, it just seems like those sheds are so localized to winter food sources. It's almost just like, if I don't have a successful late season food source, I don't bother, because I know that they've left and they will go find some. But in a big wood setting, like, maybe there isn't an option for them to leave and go find
winter ground,
a winter food source or something. Like, where are you finding these sheds, and is it tied to like a food source?
If it's a mild winter, you'll do probably better in food sources. But when it's a bad winter, they honestly don't feed much. Like, deer can actually somewhat like hibernate, or they don't have to eat even every day in the winter. So most of the time, and most of my biggest bucks that I've ever found were in bedding areas. Just because, I do think that a bigger buck, when we have these rougher winters, I kind of know where some of these deer bed, and, he'll lay in that bedding area. I mean, he won't actually lay in the bed for days, but he'll stay on that particular ridge for days, hardly moving at all. And when you know that that's where he's wintering, and that's where he has been wintering in past years, that's the best place to find sheds. And I find a lot of them literally right in the bed. Like Goliath, the one year, I kicked him out of his bed like the day after Christmas, and I stayed out of there until like April. And I go in there in April and his bed was, not that he didn't have just one bed, but the bed I kicked him out. That's where his sheds were laying. Literally the same bed I kicked him out. It was like he left him there for me. So, but I didn't, if you are a shed hunter and those bedding areas, the best thing to do is not to get too anxious and just to stay out of those bedding areas. Because if you just leave them be just right, there's a good chance that's where they're going to drop their animals.
I agree. What's your take on that? Not having to eat for multiple days.
I mean, they're always. I mean, from a deer.
Jeremy's a biologist by trade.
That's my background.
That's why I'm asking.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Not anymore, but yeah. So I mean,
was a biologist, always a biologist.
Yeah, I still use it occasionally. From like a physiological standpoint, I mean, they have to understand that getting up and moving to eat, when they get to eat and consume, is going to outweigh the energy that they've burned from getting up and moving in the actual eating and digestion process.
Depending on what they eat.
Yep.
Correct. So what their understanding is, like, let's say the conditions are just extremely harsh. If food is limited in the area, they're not going to get up, travel a half a mile, browse on some really woody, like non-digestible type stuff.
Like hemlock or something.
Exactly. Yeah. Only to come back because the net is a net loss.
So they're running the numbers.
Exactly.
They're running the numbers. I mean, we talked about this with Bronson the other week from a fawning standpoint. Like, these deer are running numbers.
Why don't they leave? Why don't they go bed somewhere where there's better food?
They may not have an opportunity, or it's already too late.
Not to interrupt you. Yeah, big woods, sometimes they don't have an option.
Yeah, it's already too late too. That winter, that really? Temperature sets in. Where are they going to go?
Yep. It just seems like this is just my wishful thinking. It seems like there would always be an option, like for them to get, if they sense a front coming in or something, like a major snow front, like wouldn't they get up and go 5-6 miles to like a pine grove or somewhere where they're aware of like food, and then just stay there? Like, that's what I think I see on my farm. It's on a smaller scale, just local to winter food sources, but it would seem like when they sense this harsh weather is coming, they're going to go and stay where there is food.
I think that comes back to kind of the understanding of home range and core area, and that, especially on a big wood standpoint, that deer understands every inch of his core area. He doesn't understand every inch of his home range, right? So he knows where food is and where's the bed and maybe where the does are near his core area. What he doesn't know is if he travels 4 miles still in his home range, is there going to be food there when he gets there? He doesn't know that now. Yeah. He may have known that 2 months before then, But at that point in the season, he doesn't know that it exists. So I don't think that he's willing to take the risk. Again, I think he's running the numbers and saying, man, I'm going to burn a ton of energy getting out there. If there isn't food and this weather hits, I'm screwed.
Well, and they have to make a choice too. So a lot of times in a bad winter between thermal cover or food. Like thermal cover is extremely important. Heavy winds, super cold temperatures can just take the energy and reserves right out of them if they don't have the right cover. Yeah. So,
well, in fairness, I think you're right on with that too. Not to keep bringing it back to my farm, but obviously this is my experience. I did experience that, and I don't know if it was because deer will eat cedar trees, right, or pine trees, and they'll also
they don't want to, but that becomes one of their last resorts.
And it's also a primary thermal cover source. So, it was Goose when he was 3-year-old. We had a real tough bout in the winter. I don't remember how long it was or whatever, but to my knowledge, he had not been west of the Carroll County piece. It was just almost exclusively like Roberts, Ramsey, Hall, and then he would branch out from there.
Yeah, move in between.
But he spent a significant amount of his time. When that real tough weather bout happened, I got pictures of him at least 2 miles away on just like a ditch. He was just using this ditch, and he moved into that giant pine patch
thicket
just for like that week or two.
Yeah.
And they just stayed there.
Well, and a lot of it too just depends on a couple of things. Again, leading up to it is what's the mass production been? So have they been able to build adequate body fat essentially? And then how hard has the rut been on them? Because, if they're burning through their body fat during the rut and then they have a hard winter, they're really in a world of hurt. And that's why it takes, going back to this whole antler growth body repair, a lot of those deer, I think, coming out of the mountains essentially are having to put so much more time into body repair prior to going into antler growth in many cases that I won't say that they're naturally smaller, but it's not necessarily limited because of their age or nutrition or genetics as much as it is they just put a whole hell of a lot more resources into repairing their body before they could put it into their antler growth.
Yeah.
But if we have mild winters and stuff like that, then we're in a lot better situation.
Oh, we lost him, didn't we?
Did it?
Well, it's fun while it lasted.
There it is.
Whoa, that was so weird.
Oh, hold up. We can't hear you.
You mute?
No, I think it's on his end.
We can't hear you, Steve. Can see you.
It says he's muted. I just asked him.
we should be good now,
Yep.
right?
There you go.
Got
Hear
ya.
me?
Yep, got
Yeah, I
ya.
don't know. I could have lost somewhat of the signal. It says my phone's charging now, so
Well, there you go.
hopefully
Hey, all right.
There you go. Yeah,
back up.
it just is a priority standpoint, I think, with those deer and understanding, like, at the end of the day, when in that winter stretch, and in particular when they get to like January to early March before green up, is if I get up out of this bed and I move, I have to have a net gain. Otherwise, it's not worth me getting up.
Absolutely.
Yep,
That's exactly what I see here. We went through a stretch last winter because we got like 2 feet of snow and then it all iced over.
Yep.
So I can't imagine the energy. I know when I was trying to scout, like 100 yards was taking me probably like literally 15 minutes to go 100 yards. And
Jeez.
I can't imagine the amount of energy deer were using to try to get around in that stuff 24 hours a day if they had to. So I think it just comes to a point, like you said, their body's telling, as hungry as you are right now, you're only going to die faster if you go out and move. And
So
I think that's what
how
you see.
long, what is the time span on that? Like how long can it, because
I mean, a lot of it
'cause
depends on their fat reserves.
deer like literally just burn, like metabolize to create heat? Isn't that how it works?
Well, so they're burning their internal fat off. They build those fat reserves, and then as they build, they're using that for energy, but they're also building heat for their body and stuff. Even when you talk about like if you harvest a deer in like October or even early November, you pull them out and you've got like kidney fat all over it. That's the indication of a healthy deer that it's already built its fat reserves, so you're getting kidney fat surrounding those internal organs. But all of that burns fast come rut and then winter time, because food, especially when you talk about big woods, you know, the quality and the amount of food just
Yep.
goes off a cliff.
Yeah.
Right. Versus in a lot of cases, it's decreasing towards green up, which then blows it up, and then it just dies, and then it's maintained. And I mean, that's why in a lot of these cases, and I know we're not talking about game lanes here in particular, but some of these national and state forests, like I would love to see them do more cuts
Timber management,
selectively.
that's exactly what I was going to say.
Because you got to create browse in a lot of these areas where it's just fern on the ground. Like they're eating acorns in the
Dinosaur
woods,
food.
but yeah, that's it. There's nothing else.
Yep. No, I see that a lot up here. Now, unfortunately, what I'm seeing is, you know, I'm a deer hunter, so obviously the deer are my priority for these woods. But what they're doing here, and it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, except for timber value, is they're clear cutting areas, and then
Pulling the tops out. That's what he's going to say.
Maybe.
you hear me okay?
Now we can.
I think you're coming back.
Okay. It could just be signal, but I mean,
Ding, 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 ding. That's funny. Hey, you should buy your Wyoming preference point today.
Okay.
hear me,
I feel like we're in a Nintendo game.
That's funny.
after about a year, they're coming in and spraying, and just that they never get as good. Did I lose you guys?
Yeah, well, you're coming back now. Is that us?
It's his signal.
I can.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's trying to catch
I
up.
can.
You're good.
Okay, so you
All right. Hopefully, we're good.
so you said that they were going in, timber crews were coming in, then we kind of lost you after that.
Okay. Yeah, well, they come in and then they spray with herbicide. I think I lost you again.
No, you're
Nope,
good.
we're good.
Oh, okay. Yeah, they come in and spray with herbicide.
Well, we did make
Oh,
it
boy.
2.5 hours almost.
That's good. We'll wrap it next time we get tough with them. We lost you a little bit.
All right.
We're gonna. Well, that's all right, Steve. Listen, man. I think what I want to do is, I guess, a couple things. I know you're gonna come out with that kind of trail cam summary here. I'd love to circle back as maybe we get closer to the season, so maybe September, and kind of just to understand like what you got, what you're seeing, what your strategies are like going into that, and then really we should do a good follow up come like that late winter time period, because I think we'll all be kind of yearning for the next big thing from us. But before we lose you, I guess a couple things. How can people get in touch with you, or what's the best way?
The best way is social media, either Facebook or Instagram. It's just Sherks Guide Service. I also have a website, sherksguideservice.com. But, you know, if you want to get to me quick, usually, you know, within an hour, if it's Instagram or Facebook, just shoot me a message, and that usually works best.
Cool. And did I see you were doing like a course or something coming up as well?
Yep, I do a lot. Just, it's never really was a plan of mine, but a lot of people like to, you know, do like big woods workshops, you know, and how I approach big woods, scout and hunt and all that kind of stuff. So I usually probably do about 8 or 10 of them a year. It's
Cool.
entirely in the field. I'm only going to do a couple more this summer, because once we get closer to hunting season, I don't want tons of people going through my hunting areas. So
Cool.
The best, you know, if someone was interested in that, I think we're just about booked up this year, but you know, early next spring, I'll be taking on, you know, some more people for those classes.
Awesome, man. Well, dude, we appreciate you coming on. And like I said, let's make sure we get you back in September leading up to the season. And
It's been great
turn
chatting
in.
with you. It's fun talking to very similar minded people. And, you know,
yeah, no doubt, man.
The same goes for you.
we're just
guys.
ego
I had
stroking,
a great
basically. So.
time.
Yeah, well, it's just more of like reaffirmation. I'm like, am I crazy? No, you're saying yes. We're not crazy. You see that?
Yeah. Yeah, we'd definitely like to have you
Amen to
back
that.
on sooner than later.
Nope. Anytime you guys want to, just give me a little notice and I'll be glad to join you.
Cool, man. I'm gonna send you a message on Instagram too. Get your address. We're gonna send you some hunter gear over and stuff. But we appreciate you coming on, and we'll look forward to getting you back on next time.
My pleasure, guys. Have a great day. Thank you.
All right,
See you, Steve.
Bye.
Sweet.
Very sweet.
It is really cool. I mean, obviously very specialized in that kind of big woods hunting scenario, but a lot of similar things still cross over to a farmland setting like you have, or mine's kind of a hybrid. I've got mountain, I've got some open and farmland that I'm planting food plots in, but
they're all deer.
Just similar strategies to it, but kind of real interesting in his approach there, especially as it gets towards that rut, because we've talked about it before. Like, I 100% rely on my cameras to give me data, and it gives me great data, but I'm definitely over hunting or under hunting based on them.
Yeah, I agree. I'm trying to check, even just remember, like, if I, because I've made comments about my farm not hunting well in November and stuff, and definitely I've hunted. I mean, I put a fair amount of time, but I have to wonder if some of that I can chalk up to just
observational.
Yeah, what we're talking about with the cameras. Yeah, it's a hard time of the year to get pictures of bucks.
That's because you also don't want to go in there and hunt when it's not the right time and just put unwanted pressure, right? That's a huge killer of big bucks, is just putting pressure, and never being the right time to go in and kill them. So, yeah, I mean, that it's still hunting, right? People will say, oh, you can't use cell cameras, like it takes all the hunting out. It's like, no, man, like, listen, it's one tool in the toolbox that helps give us most recent information, and it's valuable, but it's also detrimental to how you think about hunting and your strategy overall, because if you rely on them too much, you're going to miss opportunities, without a doubt.
I think I'm going to get at least a handful of them probably running this weekend.
And then we're going to get some on the new Ohio lease on Friday or Monday.
Somehow I got a ton of work all of a sudden. Like, I think it's this spraying his beans is going to take a minute.
Yeah.
So
probably.
I've got a lot of I'm going to spray 6.5, like almost 8 or 10 acres of plots this Saturday.
That'll take some time.
So
yeah, better get on that.
That'll be Saturday, and then Monday
we'll head up to the farm.
We're gonna jet back up to the lease and
do
the same thing. I think so. We don't have any spraying to do there, fortunately. I don't know. I don't know how many acres, or I'm not sure how much, and many plots we can do there, but
let's try to get a gauge on it when we're up there.
Yeah, I think the hope would be just, connect with Bob, see how we can help him get that thing unstuck, the disc, and then maybe just have him give us a plan for like what he's going to spray and stuff, and then we'll, accommodate him with seed, and then let's spend the rest of the time just like nosing around some different areas of the property.
Some cameras up.
Exactly, yeah.
Cool. Well, I appreciate everyone listening to this episode of HUNTR Podcast. If you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast.
Was that the load the gun and
it sounded good, right?
Click the subscribe button.
Click the old mouse click.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Subscribe if you haven't heard already. We appreciate Steve Sherk being on. It was some cool information. If you haven't looked up Steve, check out Sherk's Guide Service. If anything, if you just want some cool deer porn, go check out his Instagram, because there's some giant velvet bucks on it right now.
Or landscaping service if you need your grass cut.
Yeah, potentially. Looking for some edging, call Steve. But no, we appreciate him being on, and obviously a guy that really knows his stuff, and that's kind of what this podcast has been about. I mean, learning stuff, talking to like-minded people, and hopefully you guys found some stuff that you can use in this season for yourself.
Yeah. If I can leave us with a note here. It's definitely like I don't know. Like I've passed up Pennsylvania for so long just because I don't have like a spot. Obviously Steve's finding all these deer on public land and stuff, and I just haven't felt the need or been excited enough to go out and try to do that. And I'm not saying that I'm at that point yet where I'm like, it's
only so much time in the season. Yeah. I think if you would kill early again in Ohio, you probably would.
I'd probably go to Illinois, to be honest. But
maybe.
I'm just saying, like, it's re-entering my realm of consciousness anyways, to where it's like, I would consider trying to find something.
We've been finding some big bucks. I mean, they're here.
Yeah.
So you can't hunt mine, but they're
Fair
here.
enough. Yeah. I don't know. It's on the radar anyways.
On the radar. So. Coming back. Well, cool. Appreciate everyone listening, and we will see y'all next time.
Later.
Take me